So hello everyone and welcome to the Interreg Central Europe Anniversary Conference here in the dynamic and fabulous city of Berlin, the German capital. My name is Mariana Evenstein and I'm delighted to be here with all of you as the moderator of this very special meeting. As you all know, of course, this year marks the 20th anniversary of transnational Interreg cooperation in Central Europe. 20 years is a very significant milestone, and I think it's safe to say we can look back on 2 decades of a really impressive track record of putting some fantastic ideas into practice. And those ideas put into practice for the benefit of countries, communities, and individual citizens throughout the region. But before we begin, it's my pleasure to introduce the host of this year's conference. He's the Director General at the Department for Policy Affairs at the German Federal Ministry for Transport and Digital Infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Gerhard Schulz.
Minister Sharoni, dear Mr. Gerhard, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, dear friends. It is a great pleasure to welcome you here in the Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure in Berlin for the annual conference and 20th anniversary of the Central Europe Interreg program. Indeed, the first thing that should be said today is Happy Birthday, Central Europe. Since 1997, the Interreg program for Central Europe has successfully been funding cooperation projects. This success was brought about by many different people in many different roles. Politicians, representatives of the Commission and of member states and regions, project partners from regional authorities, from universities and associations, and well as from the private sector. And last but not least, the managing authority and the joint secretariat have played an important part too. All those cooperating in the program come from a great variety of regions within the 9 partner states which take part in the Central Europe program. And all of you are here today in impressive numbers. So it is a particular pleasure to be hosting the 2017 annual conference, which is at the same time a Jubilee celebration. As you know, the Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure takes a keen interest in the Interreg transnational programs. Within the federal government, we are the ministry responsible for the content of the transnational programs. This responsibility is rooted in our competence for spatial planning and spatial development. Accordingly, we see the cooperation in the transnational programs in a spatial perspective. For us, the main focus of the programs remains a sustainable and homogeneous development of larger regions. These transnational spaces are connected either by geographical features or by powerful economic and functional links. In the case of Central Europe, these links are created by several elements. The Central European region is marked by a variety of large and medium-sized cities, many of which are capitals and host important European cultural monuments. They all have a rich historical past and have been very influential in shaping Europe's history. Prominent examples are Warsaw, Prague, Bratislava, Budapest, Vienna, Ljubljana, Venice, and for the matter, Berlin, to name only a few. On the other hand, within the Central Europe space, there are also densely populated industrial regions, as well as predominantly rural areas. Moreover, this region is still affected by the impacts of the division of Europe into East and West. With the accessions of the Middle and Eastern European countries in 2004, the European Union took a major step towards deeper integration. Interreg played a quite an important role in supporting this process of integration. Last but not least, and this is something which I would like to emphasize as a representative of the Ministry of Transport, the Central Europe area is also a particularly important one in terms of European connectivity. 6 of the 9 core network corridors of the trans-European transport networks run through the Central European area, and of course, this is quite a decisive factor of the development of the region as a whole. Most prominently, these transport links incite us, as so many other factors, to think transnationally and to define our own interest by taking into account what is happening on the other side of the border. And this is where we see the great value of the Interreg transnational programs. They make people realize that the future of their region is connected to the future of their larger area. As we are in Berlin today, let me point out as an example that a large city like Berlin would miss many chances of development if it did not take into account that it is connected with the Baltic as well as the Adriatic via the trans-European networks. It also has a lot to gain from cooperating with cities like Szczecin, Wrocław, Prague, and Venice. The transnational Interreg programs offer the unique opportunity for cooperation between regions which are not in the immediate neighborhood of each other, but which nevertheless do have common potentials and which will be stronger when they exploit and develop these potentials commonly. And beyond the more functional and economic links, there are many historical and cultural bonds which run very deep and which are very much alive. This is an important element of Interreg too. It gives people from different regions and countries the opportunities to meet and discuss, to find out about their common history and to preserve their cultural heritage together. And beyond that, and most important, people come together to frame their common future. The so-called soft element of Interreg, that is, the element of people meeting and learning from each other, is a crucial precondition for delivering tangible results. People do not meet in the projects for the sake of meeting, although making friends and having fun is most welcome too. They meet because they work together on pressing common challenges and because they develop new common solutions and strategies on how to deal with these challenges in the future. A prominent example for this is the Label project, which my ministry was co-financing in the last funding period. We will be hearing more about this particular project later on. But let me just say here that from my perspective, this has really been a transnational Interreg project at its best. This project brought together numerous partners from Germany, the Czech Republic, Austria, and Hungary. It has dealt with a very tangible problem, namely flood risk management along the basin of the River Elbe. This by nature is something which none of the regions through which the Elbe is running can solve on its own. The project has established networks of the municipalities along the river and has namely put the firefighters into contact so that they actually knew who to call when the flood waves were coming. This sounds almost too basic not to have existed before, but it would not have been brought about without the Central Europe program. But the project also went beyond that. It dealt with a classical question of spatial planning, namely land use, and developed common approaches and strategies for soil sealing and retention areas. All that with a very practical result that years later, during the next flood of the Elbe, the regions concerned were much better prepared and the negative impacts could be limited. Ladies and gentlemen, today Central Europe can look back at the proud history of 20 years, filled with many such success stories. Of course, and as always in human life, there might have been less successful episodes too. especially on the more administrative side of things. But that is not what we should prevail when we look back and when we look forward to shaping the future of this program and of all the other transnational programs. What we should never forget is that with Central Europe and with all the Interreg transnational programs, we have something quite unique. Member states, regions, and many, many project actors working together and investing a lot of determination and creativity to take their region forward, thereby playing a crucial role for cohesion and integration in Europe. And in our present times, that direct involvement of so many different actors is something very precious, which we should preserve. For all of you who have worked with Interreg for many years, Europe has become a reality. And that experience is truly important. Accordingly, and this shall be my last point, let me tell you that in spring this year, the German government has adopted a first official position concerning the future of cohesion policy. As a part of this, it is stated very clearly that Germany is in favor of continuing all three strands of Interreg after 2020. So there can be no doubt about strong German support for Interreg in the debate about the future of cohesion policy. In this spirit, I wish us all an interesting and fruitful annual conference with many stimulating discussions and, last but not least, the successful launch of the third call of the Central Europe program. Let me just thank all those who have contributed to organizing this big event, namely all the colleagues in the Secretariat and the Managing Authority of the Central Europe program, and also the staff here in the Ministry. Welcome again in Berlin and to the Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. I hope you will all feel very much at home here and will enjoy the conference and your stay. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much indeed, Mr. Gerhard Schulz. And I'd just like to mention, so there are more than 400 of you here today at this conference in Berlin, but many more people are taking part by watching online because this event is also being live streamed. So why don't we just all wave to the people on the internet? Hello, we see you. So, as Mr. Schulz mentioned, a conference such as this, marking 20 years of Interreg Central Europe, is really the perfect opportunity to take a look back, to see the journey that Interreg Central Europe has taken over the years, to see what has succeeded and what this program has done for the region. From looking in the past, we would also like to then look into the future, to the role of our program and to the projects that will be going on in the coming years and even beyond that. To do that, today we're very pleased to be speaking with numerous stakeholders. We've got some folks from local, regional, and European government. We have some guests from public as well as private organizations, as well as professional experts from a number of fields. So we're going to get a lot of different perspectives during the course of the day. But we would also like to hear from all of you. That includes the people watching online on the live stream. So if you would like to send us your thoughts, your comments, you can even send us your photos. You can do that via Twitter. Just use the hashtag 20yearsCE. And if you like, you can even send us some questions during the interview and panel discussions, and perhaps we'll be able to incorporate them into our discussions during the course of the day. And I think for all of you who have had a look at the agenda for the next couple of hours, towards the very end of this afternoon, we'll also be opening a new call for project proposals at this conference. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to present a short film about our program. So let's have a film. All right, so yes, applaud by all means. All right, so a quick overview of just the kind of impact that Interreg Central Europe has had and can continue to have on this region. But we'd like to now hear from individual member states, from some individual perspectives. And for that, I'm pleased to introduce now my first two guests, Ms. Rosella Ruska and Ms. Andrea Reiner-Zerowska. There they are, ladies. Will you come join me, please, on the stage? You can give them a round of applause. So Ms. Rosella Ruska was a monitoring committee member for Italy in the CADSES and Central Europe programs from, no, you sit. We're going to play musical chairs today. Just you wait, everybody. This is going to be great. So Rosella Ruska, as I was saying, was a monitoring committee member for Italy in the CADSES and Central Europe programs from 2000 to 2013. So she's seen quite a lot of developments in these programs. And Andrea Reiner-Zerowska has been a program national contact point for Austria for CADSES in 2002. Ladies, thank you very much indeed. Rosella, if I may, I would like to begin with you. We just saw in the film the program has changed quite a bit in the last 20 years. We saw it began as an kind of experiment, if you will, in Southeast Europe, and now it's a much more focused, result-oriented program. That's what we like to see, how we like to see it. But it's not just about the geography, is it? Can you explain to us what are the most important differences between the CADSES programs, which was before, and now the Central Europe programs? A microphone is here.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, also to those who are on the internet. And I had the pleasure and the honor to accompany, to follow, to prepare, and to be involved in the preparation and implementation of this program from the very, very first experiment in 1997 up to 2013. And I have to say that what I noticed are not dramatic change, but a lot of positive developments of some key nice and good elements that are in this program, from my point of view, from the very beginning. And I will just mention some of them, but I'm sure that there are much more. Knowledge in many sense. Knowledge within the regional and local capacity. In the very beginning, regions didn't really know how to cooperate, how to develop a project of European level and sense. And now regional and local actors all around this area are really skilled ones, I have to say. Knowledge about the territorial potential. We didn't have in the beginning any analysis, any real foresight, any solid and evidence about what to do and what could be done. Nevertheless, we worked a lot, but this was the result of an intense wish and will. But now the program can rely on much more solid evidence, analysis, understanding, and so things can be really more concrete and result-oriented. Knowledge in the partners. Lots of partners now know each other. Lots of partners know where to go and where to search for another partner. This was not in the beginning. Another main element, I would say, is confidence, trust, and mutual learning. In the beginning, this program was based on a strong, really, sentiment of cooperation that was nevertheless limited to the pioneer 4 member states with the Commission. They started looking outside and trying to bridge again parts of Europe that were disconnected. But this exercise that was accompanied by a strong political commitment was really in a limited circle. Nowadays, this sense of mutual learning, confidence, I think is spread all over the partners, the stakeholders, those who are part of the life of the program. I've seen in the monitoring committees, it's completely different now. We are on equal, everybody's on equal foot, everybody has the same understanding, and this helps a lot. Third element, innovation and piloting. I think in this aspect, something more could be done. Because in the beginning, this program was really a sort of discovery channel, I would call it, because we were really exploring what did not exist. We had no procedures, no projects, and we had to really create. But this was really powerful, really open mind, really fruitful. Now the program is strongly supporting the implementation of strategies and policies at European level, but I fear that a little bit of the really without limit exploration power is not anymore, and I think that something could be done, because having some seed for what are called the black swans, something unexpected, something that is not in the line. This should be continued, because it is the power of the future, the power of what we don't know. That is always life, and we have to bring life in whatever we promote and fund. And this, I would say, mostly are the elements that are changing, and maybe will continue to change, but always in a positive way, in my understanding.
Well, then let me ask perhaps a follow-up question. So you mentioned what's changed is better know-how, there's better cooperation, there's a culture of cooperation that has grown, and now what we need to work on is innovation to push that forward. So from your point of view, how can we push the innovation? What would be your advice then?
I think that we should keep some little space or room really for seeding things without expecting no precise results. Because innovation is does not come from really structured or fully organized or monitored processes. So I think that in some ways, with some seed money, with some openness for not being complying with nothing, I think that a little corner of open space should be kept to facilitate whatever, without demanding or expecting nothing precise, but having in mind that we want to open a window, I would say, just that.
Andrea Reiner Zarowska, I'd like to turn to you now. Sort of a similar type of question. What I've been hearing is that apparently, for members of the Interreg community, territory matters. So is that true? Does territory matter when it comes to these sorts of projects? Or maybe you could just tell us from the perspective of Austria how projects have changed from CADSES to Central Europe now.
I would say the territory matters, yes, and how the projects changed. I would start rather with the thing that has not changed. I have seen a lot of projects in my career, and I have to say that from CADSES on until this period and the projects that we are facing in Interreg Central Europe 2014 to 2020, I still see the believers. They believe in the spirit and in the essence of Interreg, that cooperation is taking us forward. But more than this, the projects that have been implemented or are on the way to be implemented are taking the regions forward by means of cooperation. So I still see the people that have been working on projects, on ideas, on exploring new methods from CADSES on, and still they are in the program right now. So there must be something very special about the program, about the area that keeps them going. And I think what keeps them going is that although the area has changed from CADSES on, starting with 4 countries, then having 14, 16 countries, then having 8, 9, with different profiles and different levels of development in different terms, political, economic, and any other terms, that the people and the program and their projects are still answering the needs of the regions, and therefore the institutions are working on these projects and are coming back with their ideas.
So then my next question perhaps to both of you, then we can sort of go back and forth. From your perspective, from the perspective of your country, Italy, what has been the greatest achievement these past 20 years that you can look back on? What stands out for you in these last 2 decades?
I think that for the Italian regions, this program was really important and crucial because it helped really the regions to put themselves in a different wider international perspective. And they were not used, when we started with this program, they were not used to have transnational cooperation. There were some cross-border networks, there were some partners here and there, but not one region was maybe best compared to others, but there was not any clear attention to the potential of cooperation. And so this program, in the beginning, all Italian eastern regions were participating, more developed, less developed. And especially for the southern one, the less developed, this program was very, very important because it brought them forward towards the core of Europe, and this was very important in their evolution, in their capacity to develop different projects. And secondly, I have to say that this program, with these projects, I agree with what Andrea said, not only the projects are relevant, but from the very beginning, there was really a lot of attention to quality of the program, quality of the project, quality of the implementation. Central wanted to be, CADSES and then afterwards, Central wanted to be a sort of benchmarking for cooperation, territorial cooperation, with a little bit of sense of proudness to be in this program, to be central. It means a lot of things. And this also, I would say, I would encourage people to go on and to continue to be proud to be central. It is important, really.
Yeah, and from the perspective of Austria then?
From the perspective of Austria, the main achievement is not only the outputs and the results that have been achieved, but really also the mean how to achieve this cooperation itself and the quality of cooperation. And I have to admit that the cooperation across countries and across sectors, disciplines, has brought a lot of new ideas, new perspectives into the thinking of the institutions, into the public sector, but also in the private sector. But more than that, within Austria, it has also had the positive effect that the institutional cooperation in Austria has been strengthened. We have seen also the emerging of cooperation between Austrian institutions in these transnational projects. So they are not only networking with partners in institutions abroad and across different sectors, but they are also networking within their own country and putting their competencies together to work on common issues, common challenges.
I would like to now perhaps open up the floor to any of our audience members. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, we will run over with a microphone for you if you like. If you're still thinking about it, we can perhaps come back at the end of our talks with our other guests if we have a few moments of time that we can open up the floor once again. So, Ms. Rosella Ruska and Ms. Andrea Reiner-Zerowska, many thanks indeed for all of your comments. You stay where you are. No, you stay where you are. So let's have a warm round of applause for these two, our first. So being the first is never easy. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our next two guests, and they are Mr. Pino Musolino and Mr. Peter Heiland. So yeah, you can, gentlemen. Right over here. So we're playing a bit of musical chairs today, or at least I am. I get to sit in different chairs. So just a quick few words of introduction. Pino Musolino is president of the North Adriatic Seaport Authority in Venice, one of the most beautiful cities, of course. He's been involved in multiple CADSES Central Europe and Interreg Central Europe programs. And Peter Heiland from Germany is a consultant who also has many years of experience in transnational projects. So thank you, gentlemen, also for joining me here on the stage. So, Mr. Musolino, I'd like to start with you, if I may. So, Interreg projects, they are relatively small in size. They're known mainly for building capacities to deal with urban and regional challenges, as opposed to something like port, freight transport. Most people probably think of a much bigger infrastructure investment, so maybe some people would even be kind of surprised to hear that a port authority is taking part in such a low investment program. So tell us why the Port of Venice has been participating in Central European projects for all these years, and I guess it has been almost 2 decades that it has been.
Well, thanks a lot, and let me first thank all the authorities here, and particularly the Ministry of Infrastructure of Germany, first of all, for inviting me here. And it's true that it's quite unusual for a port to be seen in these kind of situations and talking about Interreg projects. Indeed, we are maybe more to be seen in TEN-T discussions or large infrastructural investments. But on the other hand, we do believe, and that was practiced since, as you said, 20 years ago, to build, essentially, first of all, an awareness of the importance of infrastructures within the process of cohesion and European cooperation, and how to outline that through knowledge, awareness, studies, and appropriate development of feasibility studies, market studies, and also market penetration studies that helped us out to find, with the appropriate knowledge, how to build a better position within the Central Europe cooperation, and how, as infrastructure, we could be a key player, a key driver for growing cooperation. In this way, we have, built. Yeah, you said correctly, not large amounts of funds, but very, very specifically invested funds that helped us out to then outline projects like the one that you are seeing right now in the slides. It's the Scandria project, which is essentially the son of the Sonora project, that helped us out to outline with a very, very deep and well-studied analysis how we could have helped the connection between full multimodal, intermodal transportation between the southern part of Europe and the northern part of Europe. On the top of that, we have demonstrated that if you are coming out from the Suez Canal and you want to reach Europe, the best and most environmentally friendly way is to reach Europe through the southern part, particularly to Venice, with decrease of some 135 kilograms of CO2 emissions per TEU. And that's, well, you know, it doesn't sound so fancy put on paper, but it's really relevant. It can increase dramatically the quality of the life of our cities and our mainland Europe, particularly the central part of Europe. So, you know, we wanted to be part of these projects. Size doesn't really necessarily mean anything. It's the quality of what we do that is really changing the way that we're doing things. And in this case, the quality of what the Central Europe program has allowed us, it's amazing, it's outstanding, and helped us out, by the way, to you know, bring us and bring the activities of ports to the attention of a larger and broader audience, like the one that we have here today, here and virtually online, as you said. And to discuss and to share best practices and to understand each other and to see how we can create a better transport system, a network of transport system that can, at the end, improve the life of every European.
Well, can you give us maybe a few more details about how these Interreg projects have changed the Port of Venice? So,
well, you know, as you said, we are actively involved in this. Well, let me just check on my papers, just to be sure that I'm not saying anything wrong. My guys there will be very disappointed otherwise and say, well, why are you just playing low on what we're doing? You know, well, we were involved in this since the beginning. Actually, I would like to point out also to take the inspiration from what Ms. Ruska said before. 20 years ago, I was in high school. And so I essentially grew up in the, with the idea that a stronger, better European cooperation is not something new or something abnormal. It's actually the normality for me, for my generation, for the people of our generation. And this is probably the most important and the most relevant thing of all. This said, of course, for us, and since I became president, it was a no-brainer that absolutely we have to pursue this way and to work in this direction more and more and more. So essentially, so far we covered 3 programming periods and overall 6 projects, 3 of which as a team leader, namely for the Empiric in WAPO and the TalkNet, which is the latest and still actually moving the first steps. Some 2.5 million euros received, of course, ARDF plus national funds obtained, 22 million overall of projects involved. All of this to say that, as you see, you know, Sonora, as I said, was very important to outline the combination of environmental advantages and better network optimization. In WAPO as well has allowed us to have a very deep understanding of some dynamics into our markets in order to use some unused capacity for inland waterways and waterborne goods. Still, again, well, you see, this is a beautiful picture. I'm very proud of this. You know, and I take advantage of this picture. This is an oceanic vessel that is coming from Far East. In a sort of way, it's a direct line that is connecting the so-called, you know, Silk Road between, well, China essentially and continental Europe. And through also the tests and the market analysis and the feasibility tests that we are you know, performing, and we will probably perform also for the next call, also with this funding and with these programs, we can represent and be better in, you know, being the westernmost point and the gateway for this, you know, fancy project. But it will, in a sort of way, it will dramatically change the way that we are thinking and understanding transports and logistics in the next future. So being as one of the doors and the gateway for the whole Europe, particularly for the Central Europe, we want to be there very well prepared because we feel also the responsibility of being the door of entrance. And through these programs and through these fundings, we can be better prepared, more aware, and definitely more equipped to do our part in order to help the whole building of a European network of infrastructures.
All right, well, Mr. Peter Heiland, you also are involved in projects dealing with water and specifically dealing with extreme flooding. And I understand we first have a short film to show everyone to give us an overview of the projects that you were involved in. Is that right? Do we have a film? Yes, we do.
Mein Name ist Uwe Restetzky, ich bin der Leiter der Feuerwehr in Görlitz in Deutschland. Görlitz liegt an der Neiße. Die Neiße ist ein Vorgebirgsfluss und sie hat die Besonderheit, dass bei einem Hochwasser die Neiße schnell ansteigt, schnell hohes Wasser führt und dieses Wasser auch schnell wieder abfließt. Das Hochwasser, was 2010 Görlitz heimgesucht hat, war eines der höchsten Hochwasser der letzten Jahrhunderte. Wir hatten einen Wasserstand von ca. 7,20 Meter und wir konnten dieses Hochwasser nur bekämpfen mit einer entsprechenden Ausstattung. Von dem Projekt Label konnten wir während des Ereignisses das Programm Inge und das Kartenmaterial nutzen, was uns sehr geholfen hat. Dank dieses EU-geförderten Projektes sind wir in der Lage, die Bevölkerung meiner Heimatstadt Görlitz vor Hochwasser zu schützen, was mich als Feuerwehrchef dieser Stadt sehr froh macht.
Dass Sie einschalten.
So a very personal look at the impact of Interreg Central Europe projects. You were involved in two of them. Mr. Peter Heiland, Ella and Label. Can you talk about these two projects and what kind of an impact they had on the Elbe River?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say greetings from the Ministry of Interior in Saxony, from Andreas Kühl and Dirk Dressler, who were planned to be here, but perhaps 2 days ahead of a big election in Germany. People working for a ministry have other duties, so that's the advantage of a consultant. So I'm very happy to replace them here today, and I take over this job, and I'm honored, because I was involved from the very first day when Ella was born. It was August 2002. The water of the 2002 Elbe flood was not gone already. It was still there, and I was invited to the ministry to talk about what can we improve to improve the cooperation, especially between upstream and downstream, between the regions, between the different disciplines, between the levels. Because until then, the idea was, if there is a lot of water coming down a river, we will have a flood. Then we see on television a lot of firefighters, sand sacks, people crying, losing everything, cars swimming around, pollution everywhere. Then we have a politician, our chancellor, for example, coming saying, don't be afraid, we help you, we give you a lot of money to build up. Then people are happy again, the water is gone, we build higher dams, and everything is okay, and we forget about the problem until the next flood is coming. And that is the starting point of the projects we worked on, because the idea was to change that. And Ella and Label, Ella is the short word for Elbe, which is the German word of the river, and Labe, the Czech word of the river. So to have this transnational cooperation already in the name, and to change the mind. So the projects are about reducing risk and to activate people, to activate many different disciplines to contribute to reducing risks. And yeah, that's what it is about. And the impact is that like this firefighter who was very active in both projects has now tools to predict floods better, to draw maps, but also to talk to inhabitants, to tell them what they could do before the flood is coming and not wait for him to pump away the problem because he can't anymore. So yeah, the impact is a contribution to a mind change in the last, I would say, 20 years. Ella already learned from another Interreg project, Oder Regio, which was a 2C project in which we started 1997 with the Oder flood to involve more people and to create tools. And perhaps it's not clear to everyone that this happened over 20 years. We have the change. We have improved the laws. We have a new German law, for example, which regulates from this year very clearly what is possible in floodplains and what not. It improves the situation. We have a European directive. They were not made by Ella and Label, but they were influenced by a lot of these kind of projects of the cooperation, and also in other countries we have the same effects. And today, the situation we have today was influenced by these projects, and they were only created because there was the program available. Otherwise, no one digs a hole in their own garden if he doesn't get compensation for that, or if he doesn't has friends he can do that with, and that was the project.
Well, and I think everybody is also aware that flood waters do not recognize borders. So I think it makes sense that people work together to tackle a shared challenge. What would you say could be something that other regions along other rivers that are affected by flooding, what could they learn or take away from the projects that you've been doing?
I would be so enthusiastic to say not what would they be able to transfer, what did they already transfer actually. Like I said, Interreg Oder Regio was transferred to the Elbe River basin. They all built up on experience from Interreg projects like the Irma program of the Rhine region many, many years ago. And then there is some of the results already transferred to the Danube. There was a project, Danube Flood Risk, which has used some of the ideas, which has created a risk atlas very similar to the Elbe Atlas. There was an exchange. This Inge tool, which is an interactive risk management system for communities, is used by almost 50 communes today, not only in the Elbe River basin, and 150 other communes are testing it at the moment. So this is transferred already, and this is a clear success which is measurable. And the mind switch, it's not measurable, but I feel it working in this field, that today it's normal that everyone has to contribute and cooperate in flood risk management. So today we feel that it was always like that, but when I started in this field it wasn't. So this is transferred far, far across Europe and out of Central Europe and the Elbe River basin.
So truly some very specific evidence of the broader positive impact of these Interreg transnational projects. So it reaches really even further than the actual places maybe that the projects are run.
Yes, because these kind of changes are not done by law and they are not done by policy. We have good laws since 10 and 20 years in this field, but the real changes are made by projects, by people working on this field and implementing these policies, and therefore you need incentives and you need a network.
Absolutely. Mr. Peter Heiland and Pino Musolino, thank you to both for sharing your insights. We can have a quick round of applause for these two as well. Again, I would just like to quickly open up the floor should somebody have a burning question or comment that they would like to express straight away. For anyone sitting here with me on the stage? Not yet? Okay, then we'll save it for afterwards. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next two guests, Mr. Andrej Kirjan and Mr. Tomáš Bondoš. Gentlemen. So I really get to try out a lot of chairs today. Yep, please do. So Andrei Kirjan is an experienced lead partner in Central Europe projects. He works at Slovenia's National Institute of Chemistry in the Department for Polymer Chemistry and Technology. And Mr. Tomasz Bondos is responsible for energy management in the city of Bydgoszcz. Did I say that right? Oh, yes. In northern Poland, and he's part of Interreg Central Europe projects in that city. So, gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Mr. Andrei Kirjan, I'd like to start with you. Now, the two projects that you worked on were called Plastice and Biocompact CE. So I'm not going to get into it myself. Roughly speaking, it had to do with environmental issues affecting small and medium-sized enterprises in Europe that go across national borders. Maybe we can start with the Plastice project. What more can you tell us about what this was all about? Okay. Oh, you need a microphone, which is right in front of you. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first thank for the opportunity to be here and be able to address you. Yeah, these project names are always very interesting. They don't say very much, so you always need an introduction. My topics always are related to plastics and environmental aspects of plastics, and we all use plastics all the time. I normally say plastics are our friends that we just dearly deny at any opportunity, but they're still our friends. We use them every day, all the time, but do we like them? No, we don't. So plastics are not that bad. We have to embrace this friend and also control it when he gets out of line. So Plastice, as we used to call it, is a project that's finished, and there we were actually trying to promote the use of bioplastics in Central Europe. We were trying to establish framework conditions, so general conditions, so that more of these materials would be used. I'm coming from research. Okay, I'm coming from research, so I knew a lot of researchers in Central Europe that knew a lot about bioplastics, but nobody else knew anything about it, and then, you know, they all rushed over to new topics. So we felt that we need to tell more people about this, particularly the public and companies, so they would use these materials. So it was mainly about promotion and communication, and our approach was, or my approach as the lead partner, I always told my partners, whoever you can reach, whoever's willing to listen, hit them. NGOs, schools, companies, policy, ministries, anybody who comes and shows a little bit of interest, catch them, tell them your story. And we succeeded that finally this story was starting to circulate around. It's like hitting a rock for a long time and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden it starts crumbling. And what I noticed, we could hear the words that we put out so many times coming back like an echo. People were repeating them, so we said, you listened, and we did get you.
And what were they and what were the words that they were repeating?
Well, they understood what bioplastics were. They understood how they can be sustainable, that they need to be certified, that there are many, technical issues that you must understand. They understood what compostability was, as opposed to biodegradability, home compost, industrial compost, things like that we were trying to explain, because they're very, very crucial and important issues.
Okay, so bioplastics as being more environmentally friendly.
Yes.
So where were you trying to get these bioplastics to be used? Are we only talking about plastic bags, or were there other uses of this bioplastic?
Well, it's anywhere. It's in any product. So, but it's not just the environmental impact. I mean, there's a impact on the economy as well. These are uses that have to be innovative, they have to be imaginative, but they have to make sense. So if companies in Central Europe can come up with, have the information and the tools so they can come up with uses, they can become market leaders. I always told companies that told me, oh, there's not enough demand. I told them, when these products will be on the shelf, it's too late. You must step in now. You must understand these materials. You know where to get them, how to process them. So we had a lot of pilot actions through which we were trying to illustrate facts about these materials. So it's not just bags. It can be anywhere. People are trying to make telephones, housings for computers, pens, and so on. I mean, they're making everything out of it. And a lot of these applications are good, but some also they make no sense. And we're trying to clarify that.
So what would be your recommendation? Like, where would bioplastics be used ideally?
Well, bio-based plastics make sense pretty much everywhere. If you're trying to reduce your environmental impact, but still, when you do a environmental burden analysis, of course, you're shifting environmental burden, so your CO2, let's say, lower, but you might have a higher impact somewhere else. Biodegradable plastics should be used wherever you have the possibility to throw the product out into waste biotreatment, either composting or biogasification. So it doesn't make sense to make a pen that you will never throw in the compost, and you shouldn't because it has metal parts and all sorts of stuff. That's not a good use. But let's say for anything to do with food or anything you throw out very quickly and it's possibly contaminated with bio stuff, that's perfect.
All right, well, now let's talk about this other project, the Biocompact CE project. What was that all about?
Yeah, it's another code name.
It is.
This is a project that's going on right now, and we've combined actually what we've learned in the Plastice project, where communication was the main point, and from another project where my friends worked in, Eco Paper Loop. They were working on paper over there, and we're on plastics. And we've put our heads together and said, okay, there are so many products out there where paper and plastic are combined. And I would just remind you, for example, of the bag that you probably use in your grocery store to buy bread. It has that nice little plastic window so you can see what you put in. When you put that into the waste, into the bin, where does it go? It goes in the paper or the plastic? And it certainly does not go in the bio waste. It's a problem, and it is a problem. Just like it is a problem for you, it's a problem for recycling of paper, it's a problem for recycling of plastics, and this can be solved. We have all the tools, all these materials exist, we just have to put them together in the right way so that we do not stop the waste options part. And that's what we're trying to do. It's not just bags, but if you start thinking about it, there are many items that we use where we combine paper and plastics because they're really great materials and they go well together. They combine really well. So that's what we're working on. And I have a short video about that.
We do. And there it is.
Okay. And somebody's eating their lunch through the bag on the floor. His friend doesn't like it. And now can't decide where to put it. He has an idea. And he'll wave to you. Okay, thank you very much.
So the hope is that we will make recycling more streamlined, more effective, and also improve compliance for all of us who are confused about where to toss that bread wrapping paper and then just end up throwing it into the regular trash. Then maybe there'll be a better way to discard our
Well, we're talking about circular economy a lot.
Yeah.
And then we have such small obstacles that really just block everything. We need to get rid of them, and if we do that in Central Europe, I think we should be proud of it and we should go after it.
Indeed. Mr. Tomasz Bondos, I would like to turn to you next, and we're going to hear about projects in your city, Bydgoszcz, and I understand. We have first a little film to show everyone before we get to our conversation. So.
Celem projektu REURIS było wypracowanie międzynarodowej współpracy zasad postępowania w przypadku powrotu natury nad rzeki. Stary kanał bydgoski jest w zasadzie perełką na miarę Europy, ponieważ żadne inne miasto europejskie nie posiada czegoś takiego w centrum miasta i otoczonego plantami. W ramach tej inwestycji przywróciliśmy jeden z najbardziej zdegradowanych odcinków ludziom, którzy od tamtej pory mogą wypoczywać nad wodą w samym centrum Bydgoszczy.
Szlak wody, przemysłu i rzemiosła to 15 obiektów, które tworzą spójną całość. Wszystkie też są w jakiś sposób powiązane z wodą. Woda wszechobecna w Bydgoszczy, będąca siłą napędową rozwoju miasta, kiedyś gwarantowała na przykład transport rzeczny, dzięki któremu miasto mogło się rozwijać.
Budynek pasywny Centrum Demonstracyjne Odnawialnych Źródeł Energii w Bydgoszczy przy Zespole Szkół Mechanicznych nr 2 służy uczniom na kierunku technik urządzeń systemów energetyki odnawialnej do tego, żeby mogli uczyć się obsługi wszystkich urządzeń, jakie tutaj pracują. Jest to siłownia wiatrowa, moduły fotowoltaiczne, mamy instalacje kolektorów słonecznych, 2 pompy ciepła w układzie kaskadowym, które służą nam do ogrzewania pomieszczeń oraz instalację wentylacyjną z odzyskiem ciepła.
Projekt Energy at School to międzynarodowa inicjatywa zrzeszająca 12 partnerów z 7 krajów Europy Środkowej. Partnerzy wspólnie dążyć będą do poprawienia edukacji w zakresie odnawialnych źródeł energii, tak aby mógł powstać nowy zawód strażnika energii budynku publicznego.
Miasto Bydgoszcz jest jednym z 10 partnerów projektu City & Gov. Głównymi celami projektu jest harmonizacja danych energetycznych, utworzenie lub wzmocnienie jednostek zarządzania energią w mieście, jak również wypracowanie narzędzi do ograniczenia zmian klimatycznych w mieście. Do tej pory udało się stworzyć koncepcję bazy danych energetycznych, zakupić rowery elektryczne. W przyszłości planujemy również zakupić demonstracyjną kamerę termowizyjną, jak również ławki solarne.
Projekt COBRA-MEN dotyczył zarządzania terenami poprzemysłowymi. Jego głównym celem było utworzenie stanowiska dla instytucji publicznych menadżer do zarządzania terenami poprzemysłowymi. W Bydgoszczy zajęliśmy się zanieczyszczonym terenem, na którym teraz stoimy, na którym wcześniej znajdowała się fabryka papy. Zrekultywowaliśmy ten teren, zagospodarowaliśmy go na cele rekreacyjne i do tej pory jeszcze monitorujemy, co się dzieje pod ziemią. Kontynuacją projektu COBRA-MEN jest projekt Greener Sites. W Bydgoszczy upadły ogromne zakłady chemiczne. Teren po tych zakładach chemicznych jest przedmiotem działań pilotażowych w projekcie Greener Sites. Chcielibyśmy zbadać wpływ tego terenu zanieczyszczonego na tereny sąsiednie zamieszkałe Łęgnowa. Bardzo się cieszymy, że możemy uczyć się od innych partnerów w tym projekcie, którzy również borykają się z podobnymi problemami i mają w swoich miastach ogromne tereny poprzemysłowe.
All right, so a lot of different areas in which Interreg Europe has had an impact on cities such as yours, with so many different areas to address, so many different types of challenges. Tell us from your perspective why it's important to have a wide range of partners from different regions, from different governance levels, and sort of areas of expertise to develop a city such as Bydgoszcz.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a honor for me that I can be here with you. I am on behalf of my president, Mr. Rafał Bruski. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here, but I would like to tell you about my city. Film has, I hope, answered partly for these questions. And yes, I can confirm that Interreg program has changed my city and has changed view of my city and image of my city. I have to say that 10 years ago, 11 years ago, in 2006, our president decided to join to Interreg programs. He said, let's try, why not? We'll see what can we achieve. So for us, it was solution to check what Interreg can offer for us and also what we can offer for Interreg and for the other partners. For us, the most important thing that we are taking part in those projects are people and are our citizens. We have realized and we have closed already 4 projects. Now we have opened 4 projects. Total amount is 8 projects. We are still looking for the other project because Bydgoszcz, my city, has changed for last 10 years very, I think about 50% maybe. It is different city when I was young. When I was young people, I have in my city dirty water, dirty river, and when we have joined to the Interreg program, my mayor realized and people, directors and decision makers realized that we have to change something because people are moving out of the city. This is a problem in my country that most of big cities are decreasing when we are thinking about population. In West Europe is different situation. Cities are bigger and bigger. I know that now about 70% of European population lives in cities. We have different problem. Our city now have to change something because we have to find solution. That's why we are in Interreg programs, how to make space of our city more attractive, more friendly for our citizens. All of us, we have to remember that Interreg program should help us change our cities, because on the first stage in our city are citizens and people. That's we are in those programs and that's we are looking for cooperation and we are still trying to take so much so we can from the other partners and implement in our city. And of course we would like to offer our experiences to the other partners.
Well, I have a question perhaps for both of you. I know that in some circles, Interreg may have the reputation of being somewhat complicated compared to other funding instruments, and yet your organization still, your city still decided to participate in Interreg Transnational projects. Well, first of all, is it more complicated, and if it is it still worth it?
It is a good question. It depends. Of course, you can find the other solution to find your ideas. For example, Horizon 2020, some Norwegian mechanism of financing live program. But we made a decision to join to Interreg because I think that total amount of money we have got is more than 3 million euro. But the money is not only the most important point of our cooperation with Interreg. Ideas and possibility to get knowledge from universities, from the other countries, from partners, I think it is more important than only 3 million euro. As you have seen on this short movie, of course we have invested those 3 million euros in our buildings to increase more efficient of public buildings and to run some education programs. But as I said, not only money are important, but knowledge and more, and I would like to say that Interreg programs are very flexible. You can get so much so you can involve your people and your personality in this program. If you are working hard in this program, you can reach goals you would like to reach. That's it.
All right, and maybe just quickly from your point of view, so Interreg, too complicated, okay complicated, and is it worth it?
Well, when you come into Interreg, it is complicated, of course. But after a while, you figure out there's a logic to it. And I think that in each of our languages, we have the equivalent of the saying in English, no pain, no gain. There has to be a little bit of pain, and that means you're progressing probably. Sports people know that. And the administration, yes, because you're referring to that, may be difficult, but if somebody cannot account their expenses, they probably need to improve in that area because they're probably making mistakes, they're not efficient, and so on. They don't know where their money is going, their resources, and so on. So also, the idea of having, the difficult and very elaborate program makes sense when you meet people who don't understand that and they start planning and you just look at them and go, this is all upside down. You don't know what you're doing. And then you go like, oh, I learned this in Central Europe. So it does make sense. I think you have to accept it and then forge ahead and focus on what you're trying to do. This is just one technical issue. Get help, find the information, just do it and go ahead, because as we've seen in all these cases and all the experiences, you can do so much. Do it.
I think that's actually quite a good moment to leave it there. So we look to the future, look to see what can become a little bit more efficient, but also take into account the complexity of the types of projects that Interreg is trying to tackle. So you have a big challenge. You need a complex project that takes time and resources and a lot of effort, but ultimately I think everybody here would agree it is definitely worthwhile. So thank you very much, Andrzej Kirjan, Tomasz Bondos, and also to the rest of my panel members for all of your insights and thoughts and reflections about Interreg in your regions. Let's have a warm round of applause once again for my interview partners. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is your last chance to ask anything of any one of our panel members, or to just give a quick comment, say, we love what you're doing, we're so happy that you're here. Anyone? Calling once, calling twice? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again very, very much for speaking with me, and yeah, we'll see you all during the rest of the afternoon. Coffee break. All right, so I can see already that our next guests are already on their way. So chairs are being moved. Something is definitely about to happen, ladies and gentlemen. And that something, I can tell you, is going to be a panel discussion on how transnational Interreg cooperation will shape Central Europe in the future. So we looked a little bit in the past, and now we're going to look into the future. And that panel is going to be moderated by the head of communication at Interreg Central Europe. So join me in giving a warm round of applause to Mr. Frank Schneider. There he is. He's ready in the corner.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you very much to the speakers of the interview session. A warm welcome also from my side. It is my pleasure, as you say, to moderate the panel discussion, but maybe to summarize very briefly what I take back home, probably also after this day, from the interview session. It is very simply, transnational cooperation works, and it makes absolute sense for those that are working with us on transnational cooperation. So, as we have heard, transnational cooperation has been an important puzzle piece during the past 20 years for helping our cities and regions to become stronger and better. But it not only works, it is also more and more in demand, as we see. We have had 2 cores so far. We had plenty of applications. We're hoping for even more applications coming up with us in the 3rd core pretty soon. And also this interest in the conference really shows me that the demand is there, and it is great. However, every 7 years, and some of you are familiar with that, the same question strikes again. It is, how are we going to take transnational cooperation forward in the next programming period? how can we ensure it still makes sense as a tool for regional development and territorial European cohesion in the future? Today, I have the pleasure of discussing these questions with a panel of experienced policymakers from the national and the European levels. As our first panelist, I would like to welcome the Undersecretary of State in the Polish Ministry of Economic Development. Since 2015, he supervises the implementation of the European Social Fund, as well as the implementation of the regional operational programs in Poland. He is also responsible for spatial planning and urban policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Paweł Chorąży. Our next panelist is from today's hosting institution. She is head of Division for European Spatial Development and Territorial Cohesion in the Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. Since 2009, she is responsible for European cooperation and coordinates the German participation in 6 transnational Interreg programs. She also represents Germany in the monitoring committee of our Interreg Central Europe program and all the others. Please welcome Mrs. Katharina Erdmenger. Our next speaker brings more than 20 years of working experience with the European Commission into the debate. He has covered a wide range of topics during these years, but mostly focused on regional policies, finance, and its coordination. He was responsible for cross-border cooperation in Southeast Europe and as head of unit for policy development and economic analysis. He's now responsible for preparing the post-2020 proposals for cohesion policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Maury Gilland. That leaves us with one empty seat. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Paweł Lukasz, who is currently chairing our Interreg Central Europe Monitoring Committee. Mr. Lukasz joined the Department of European Territorial Cooperation, the Czech Ministry of Regional Development in 2008. In 2014, Paweł became head of unit for international interrelation, which is responsible for the implementation of transnational and interregional Interreg programs in the Czech Republic. Welcome, Paweł Lukasz. So last but not least, before I will also sit down, I have to apologize for being the only Mr. Schneider on the stage today. Unfortunately, the State Secretary Michael Schneider and Rapporteur of the Committee of the Regions on the future of cohesion policy had to cancel his participation on short notice, but I think we will nevertheless have a very interesting debate. So let me start with you, Mr. Gilland. In the interview session, we heard how important transnational Interreg cooperation is for Central European institutions, regions, and cities. However, when the European Commission published its reflection paper on the future of EU finances this June, cross-border cooperation was mentioned in only 3 out of the 5 scenarios, and transnational even in none of those. It leaves us with an impression that Interreg and especially transnational cooperation have fallen out of grace, out of fashion, despite the huge interest in the funding as we see on the ground here. So my question to you would be very concretely, do you share that impression, and could you inform us maybe about how cooperation is perceived in Brussels these days?
Okay. Well, I've worked with Interreg programs and partners for almost 20 years now. And one particular thing that I've learned in that experience is that sometimes people involved in cooperation projects and programs can be super enthusiastic and optimistic about individual projects, but at the same time can be a little bit over pessimistic about Interreg and the future of Interreg. You said in the introduction there that cross-border cooperation was only mentioned in 3 of the 5 scenarios in the Commission's reflection paper on future finances. I would have said cross-border cooperation was mentioned in as many as 3 of 5 scenarios. I think if you look back over time, cross-border cooperation is not often mentioned in future EU finance papers. The fact it was mentioned as many as 3, I think, should be looked at more as a positive than a negative. And the fact that also cooperation was listed earlier in the same document as the first example of EU added value in the types of policy that the Commission supports is also extremely positive. The fact that I might have been helping draft those sections of the document is purely coincidental. So, as a direct answer, I would say that Interreg is not at all out of fashion. I would say quite the contrary. I would not be too concerned about the fact that the wording in the reflection paper is cross-border cooperation. I think that, well, I know that that is very much a simple language question. If you try to put territorial, transnational and interregional down on a piece of paper for non-Interreg people, you end up with endless questions about why you're using adjectives that all mean the same thing. So cross-border is essentially a catch-all term there. What I would say is, politically speaking, Interreg is in a very good place at the moment. I think there's very strong support within the European Parliament. I don't think I've seen a range of members of the European Parliament, particularly on the Regi Committee, who are so positive about cooperation. And with Iskra Mihailova as chair, a former minister responsible for cooperation in Bulgaria, you have somebody that really knows the policy well. We also have the chair of the Association of European Border Regions, who is now president of the Committee of the Regions. And I don't think you should underestimate the level of political support there. And the other element to factor in is that one part of Interreg, interregional, which has always been very much the smallest part financially, has also attracted growing interest over the last 4 or 5 months, particularly in its links on smart specialisation and how that cooperation can be developed. So there's a range of issues, I think, where things are much more positive than you might seem. Having said all that, and having stressed the need not to be over-pessimistic rather, there's a need also not to be over-optimistic as well. We are facing one of the most challenging negotiations on the future of cohesion policy that I have ever seen. Inevitably, cooperation as a key component of cohesion policy is caught up in that. And there are still those out there somewhere unconvinced about cooperation, and occasionally about transnational cooperation in particular, and we might come back to that later on. Above all, one key statement that is worth repeating and remembering is that political support does not always translate directly into financial allocations. And that's not how reality operates. So, to sum up in a very short answer for a long answer, things are nowhere near as negative as you might fear, but that doesn't mean that everything is sunshine and roses either. If the future of Interreg was a Facebook status, it would currently say it's complicated.
Thank you very much, Maury, for these insights, interesting insights. I would obviously be interested now, having heard this European perspective, in the national perspective, especially in Poland, from Poland. Over the past 20 years, Interreg has developed, as we have heard before, also by Rosella Ruska in the interview session, from an experimental community initiative into a result-oriented objective of cohesion policy. However, we also get a feeling that in the current debate about the future, territorial cohesion and the aim of reducing disparities seem to have lost importance in favor of some more sectoral approaches. So the question to you, Pavel, is how do you see the role for Interreg in cohesion policy after 2020?
So yeah, it is definitely a truth that for the time being we are discussing about economic governance rather than about territorial cohesion in Europe and how to link cohesion policy with this economic governance dimension. So for me, and I'm convinced that okay, territorial dimension does not have its big days now. But when you look more closely, there are quite new phenomena in this programming period, like territorial investments, ITIs, CLLD, which are implemented, which have similar peculiarities as many Interreg programs have. They do not have, of course, this transnational dimension. So I wouldn't say that on the ground it is not so visible. The question is how to highlight it. And when we look at the Polish context, I would say that it is working even better than many of other areas we are investing in. When we look at Interreg and cooperation, so I would repeat what has been just said by Morey. You seem to be very pessimistic because I hardly hear any criticism voiced towards Interreg. It seems to be a part of the cohesion policy, which is always mentioned as something which should be increased, supported with more money. But the question for me is with this in this respect. So what and how Interreg should work in. And when we discuss this thematic concentration now, it does not seem that it is the most relevant mechanism for Interreg, which seems to be rather concentrating on a thematic approach, on something which is filling in the gaps which are not covered by the traditional approach with 50, 80 or any other percentage of allocation given to the specific areas. So I think we should be pragmatic, and transnational cooperation will always supplement something which is delivered at NUTS 2, NUTS 3 level, but generally as something which complements traditional cohesion policy actions, and I see that it should be rather stemming from many rigidities which are not bad by definition. So I'd like to underline that, but it should be this area where more flexibility is given, because it is yeah, as we've just heard from previous speakers, it is cooperation based on peer learning, exchanges of experience. It is also something which is also connected with some preparatory stages. So I see this as something which is more visible in the future. And Poland, I'm very happy to have heard example of Polish city of Bydgoszcz. We really appreciate that, because it also shows how much our cities change, not only border cities. Bydgoszcz is not a border city, it is a city which is more or less in central Poland, but not neighboring regions. So if it profits from the cooperation in the transnational program, I can only applaud its, and I think every policymaker in every country would be happy with that.
Thank you very much, Pavel. The word flexibility, I think, is very much welcome in this audience. And I also know Katharina, one of the fervent supporters of transnational cooperation for many years, and very optimistic, I'm pretty sure. But maybe you can give us some more insights how you see the future role of Interreg in the future. Where do you think Interreg should go? In which direction should Interreg develop after 2020?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, let me say, really glad to hear what Maura just said. You know, definitely we have cause to be optimistic, and as we say in German, the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is that the optimist says the glass is half full, and the pessimist says it's half empty. And I think we should work on the assumption that our glass is at least 3/4 full, I think. So that's a good starting point. And then I'm really happy to say that Pavel and I seem to agree on a number of points, so that's already Poland and Germany agreeing, so that's good. That's also a good base to work on. So, how do we see it from this perspective? Well, as my Director General has pointed out early on today, the first good thing also to start on in the German debate is that there is an official of the German government saying very clearly that we want to support the 3 strands of Interreg. So there we are. We're definitely starting from the point where we say we definitely want to keep all 3 strands of them. So from there, I think we can take it rather far. Now, from the perspective of this ministry, we are such champions of the transnational programs because we are also the Ministry for Spatial Planning and Spatial Development. And that means that we see things in a very territorial and spatial perspective. And I think that also shapes our view of what cohesion should be. If we say we have a territorial perspective of this, what is so important for us in the transnational programs is that with these programs, and by the way, they're the only ones, you can actually capitalize on the many, many relations we have in space. I mean, if you imagine a map of Europe for a second, and you imagine the German map, you know, we're rather in the middle with long borders, but it's also important for those who are not exactly on the border to actually cooperate. As I always used to say, my family is from Hamburg. Hamburg is not, strictly speaking, a border town. Nevertheless, it's living very much on relation and cooperating with others in space. So our relations in space really range from Scandinavia to the Adriatic, for the matter. And as we've just seen in the presentations earlier, for instance, the Scandria project was a very important one for us because that's actually taken into account these transport links we have with that part of Europe. So that's how we really see it. We all know it's not about the big money if we talk about the transnational programs, but we know it's working on these relations in space. And that's actually also a very important element of cohesion. After all, what we want to do, we want to give all regions the chance to have the best conditions of living for their citizens. And for that, sometimes the key lies not only in investment, I mean, that's very important, of course, but it also lies in cooperating with others, exchanging with others, and making yourself aware of the fact that if you actually talk to a city that's only 30 kilometers away, happens to be on another border, that might be more important than talking to the next city, which is about 200 kilometers away, but lies in the same country. So I think that's very much our philosophy about it. And what we need to do is to come back, I think, a little bit to a notion of cohesion, which is about equal opportunities for regions, rather than just giving a maximum amount of money to SMEs. I mean, I'm not saying that that is not important, but I think to think about where does actually this region lie in Europe and where does its strength come from. And if it comes from cooperating with others, that's what we should support.
Thank you very much. Cooperating with others, is probably easiest when you're in a, we have seen it also in our film earlier today, when you have a shared history, shared values, when you're cooperating with your neighbors. Central Europe has a slightly different history in terms of transnational programs, different from more homogeneous programs. It links a still rather heterogeneous area in the heart of Europe. The program has a history of, as you say, Katharina, successfully bringing together East and West to reduce existing disparities and to foster European integration also. My question would now go to you, Pavel, from a program perspective, and as someone who has been working with the program, but also with the program beneficiaries for many, many years, why do you believe that Central Europe, this rather diverse but functional area, will still stay relevant after 2020?
Good afternoon, everyone. What we have heard today already during the first panel session, we have heard that cooperation really works. You also said that. And that's actually the important thing. And as you see, this region, Central Europe region, has always had very challenging history. So a lot of disparities remain, even though soon it will be 30 years after the Berlin Wall fall. So we still have to deal with those issues, with those challenges. And we simply cannot really tackle those challenges on local or regional or not even on the national level, because those challenges cross multiple borders, like for instance the Elbe River, like we've had the project Ella today presented. So that's a flood, it's just not stopping at the borders. So we need to have this transnational cooperation that is just the only response that can be adequate to all those challenges we are facing. And still, unfortunately, today we see all those disparities. When I also talk to our beneficiaries and applicants, you also see that they are actually happy that Interreg Central Europe and other transnational programs are actually triggers cooperation in the fields that are quite often of low domestic priorities. Quite often also it was said by the partner from Ella project that they had all these strategies and policies on the spot. However, they were not implemented unless the practitioners started doing something with that. So that I see really important that transnational cooperation triggers cooperation between different stakeholders that would otherwise not happen. Simply cooperation without transnational cooperation between those different stakeholders coming from national, regional, local level from different countries would simply not happen if we just don't have programs like Interreg Central Europe. And this is also something what needs to be think that cooperation is actually as such creating cooperation spirit. It's something more than just the project outcomes and project result. This kind of is cooperation force people to think out of the box, think about different perspectives, find new and alternative solutions which otherwise are not seen to anyone. And unfortunately, still also from my own perspective, on national level, I'm coming from the ministries, from the national level, you still see that quite often many policymakers are living in certain kind of bubbles, and they don't really see the need to cooperate in order to solve problems. But you know that the problems doesn't stop at the borders, and this is another important role of transnational cooperation that actually force politicians to some extent cooperate in the long term, because often we don't have this shared long-term planning. Again, we need a long-term planning not only on the national level, but on this transnational level in order to solve all those problems coming from the transport corridors, flood prevention, improving the innovation capacity, and so on. Those are issues that we can be stronger if we just cooperate. So for me, this is why I see that these programs that work like transnational cooperation programs like Interreg Central Europe has the future, and I'm quite optimistic that we maybe all can agree that there will be transnational cooperation in the future. Of course, it will be different shape. It might be financed differently. It might be different funding and so on. However, I'm really confident that there will be a transnational cooperation in the future because simply cooperation in this field is needed.
I was just thinking, Maury, I always hear how important cooperation is, and I'm also myself a strong believer in cooperation and transnational cooperation. However, you're saying that we shouldn't be over-pessimistic, but also not over-optimistic. You're from the UK. Betting is I guess people from the UK are famous for liking taking bets and comparing the odds of something. So my question would be, rather bluntly, is like, do we really have to be afraid, or can we just move on from just mere optimism that there might be Interreg transnational cooperation in the future, like from the inputs that you hear from the project persons in the interview session, but also in this panel now? Do we have to be afraid, or can we just really believe that there will be Interreg transnational cooperation in the future in one shape or another? I'm also asking, from a very Central Europe-focused perspective, thinking about the debate of macro-regional strategies, because it seems that a certain, I wouldn't call it priority, but a certain higher awareness is given to programs that are also identical and covering macro-regional strategies. So how do you see this? How do you see this very concretely for the program Interreg Central Europe that is not covered by a single macro-regional strategy?
Well, that's a very good question, given how much we've heard and how much is discussed about macro-regional strategies over the last few years. We've obviously seen a very high level of political interest in the strategies. We have 4 of them across Europe at the moment, and there is pressure in certain parts of Europe for more of them to be created. I have to say, and this is more a personal view, that I'm not at all convinced that it's the right direction for every transnational area. From the beginning, when we started talking with the Baltic Sea back in 2008 and 2009 about macro-regional strategy idea, for me it was clear that there has to be, first of all, a convincing medium to long-term evidence of successful dedicated cooperation in an area for it to even have a chance of working if on an expanded macro-regional basis. And secondly, there needs to be broad agreement within any specific area that a macro-regional strategy is the right way to go. I think one very good example there is the North Sea at the moment, where you might think, given the similarities with the Baltic, that that would be an obvious direction to go in, but there doesn't seem to be a specific view that a macro-regional approach is necessary there. So where does that leave Central Europe? Well, Katerina used the example of an optimist sees the glass half full and a pessimist sees the glass half empty. I once heard an extension of that where an engineer sees the glass as twice as big as it needs to be. And that kind of very rational approach is a little bit how I see Central Europe. I see it as a very pragmatic, functional area, I think you used the term. And I think that's a very good description. There are a number of fundamental elements that Central Europe has and can build on, and we saw some of the examples in the videos there on transport, on urban issues, where there's a real need and an evident added value that comes from broader cooperation, cooperation that you cannot achieve at a cross-border level, or only a cross-border level, and that would be too dispersed in an interregional context, but from a geographic area delivers what's necessary. So I think one of the areas that is a particular challenge, I think, for transnational programs as a whole, and I think one which you're addressing rather successfully from what I can see in the support material for the conference, is selling the results. Because on one level, in a transnational context, it's about delivering specific elements in specific places. We saw some very good examples there from Bydgoszcz and the results in the city. And that's clearly a success for the citizens, and they're clearly seeing a difference there. At the political level and the policy level, the challenge is how we use that to demonstrate that that's a success of transnational cooperation specifically, rather than possibly a regional or national program delivering those, and how you sell that result, particularly as I say, at the national and the European level. The specific added value, if you like. Again, having said all that, a word of caution to finish. There are voices, certainly not the majority, but there are voices which like the idea of tying transnational cooperation more tightly to macro-regional strategies. I think programs need to be vigilant about that. That's not how the policy and the process developed. It's very much the other way around. The fact that you had a macro-regional strategy for the Danube led to the logic that there should at least be a program for the Danube, because then at least you have a framework in which to channel some of that cooperation. So it was more in the other direction. So I think it's something to watch again for the policy debate. I would expect transnational cooperation to be there in the future. We've heard already the indications from a number of member states about strong support for that. Exactly how it looks, as Pavel said, it's a little early to make that call. But again, I think from a Central Europe perspective, it's about just monitoring and watching that discussion in relation to the macro regions.
In Poland, there's also the Baltic Sea region program. My question would be straightforward there. How do you see the link then between macro-regional strategies and transnational cooperation and programs like Central Europe, their role as a niche, or is it even more? Is it, could it be completely disentangled, as we just heard, as an option and go a totally different way? How would you see that, Pavel?
So I think, yeah, Poland is a medium-sized country. So we are naturally open to many different dimensions in our close and more distant neighborhood. So Central Europe is one part, Baltic Sea is the other. There is also the initiative of Carpathian strategy as the new macro-regional strategy. So I would say that many countries are in the similar situation. So when we look at Germany, Italy, and many others, Czech Republic, so they have the same connections. So it does not only limit to one, let's say, subgrouping or one macro strategy. So I do not see, I wouldn't equal future cooperation for every member state only with one transnational program. Of course, the question is also what these programs will be about, and for me, it is rather the first question to be answered, and then to say, okay, we need 2, 1, or 3 different programs. But when we look at current development, so let's look to extremes, Poland and Slovenia. Slovenia seems to be very distant from Poland, so it is not at the Baltic Sea definitely. So when we have this program as a platform of cooperation, so we can observe more and more mutual contacts between our countries, not ignoring the fact that our size, our potential is different. So when we also look at development model patterns in Europe, at least Poland's perception was always that we have this east-west axis. So what is really a value of Central Europe program, that it also promotes this vertical axis north-south, which is really important, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also more economic, more industrial cooperation among other countries. So this example of Venice Venice port as an example of promoting and doing something with this is also an excellent proof that it can work. So just to sum up, we do not necessarily see that single member state equals to one macro-regional strategy. We should take into account different contexts, different geographical situations of the EU countries, but also we should first look at the content and possibilities which will be in the transnational cooperation, because for me it is a kind of ex ante checking how it should be operationally shaped.
Katharina, I'm sure you want to contribute to this as well, because we hear sometimes from Germany and German partners that especially those programs that are linked to macro-regional strategies get more visibility. We heard about how important it is to communicate the results, to look into the sustainability of the projects. As I said, like in Germany, the feedback sometimes we get is at least policymakers are more aware of the strategies and therefore, as a result, also more aware of the programs and the projects linked to that. So my question would be, where do you see, how would an Interreg Central Europe program have to develop to stay relevant and interesting also to partners and also to the policymakers if the macro-regional strategies take so much attention probably, even though we think it is probably not necessarily linked always to transnational cooperation?
Yeah, but to answer that, let me say first that we have 6 transnational programs in Germany. 3 of them have macro-regional strategies and 3 have not. And we're really equally attached to all 6 of them. To us, they're really equally important. And if you allow me a little joke there, working with 6 programs is really a privilege. I sometimes feel like I have 6 children. I love them all. Sometimes one of them is a bit more difficult than another, but in the end, you know, they're all part of my family. So that's how it looks for us. We really need them all for different reasons. Now, yes, that's also what colleagues from the regions and Länder who work in the those programs with macro-regional strategies definitely always give us as a feedback. It does increase the visibility. That maybe, or let's say that's an observation. My observation from the national level to that is, but then if you do look closer into what actually works within the macro-regional strategies, most of the time, it's Interreg projects. Because I'd say maybe that comes from a fact that macro-regional strategies are inherently something very territorial. The only question is whether that actually is really known yet to everybody who works in a macro-regional strategy. It is a very territorial approach, but I think it hasn't maybe sort of broken down to all the layers of it. And frankly speaking, there is a governance problem in the macro-regional strategies. So having said that, that's why we actually think that the important thing, of course, is in all these transnational areas, you need, of course, a very strategic approach of where you want to take your region. And that's true for all of them. So some do it with the macro-regional strategies, and as I said, there's maybe some work yet to be done on the governance for it. By the way, in the Baltic Sea region, it worked exactly the other way around than you were just describing. There was, even before an Interreg program, the so-called VASAP course of cooperation. I don't know whether anyone knows what that is. That's the cooperation of the ministers for spatial planning in the Baltic Sea states. And they formed an organization called Visions and Strategies Around the Baltic Sea, VASAP. That's been working since the early 1990s, long before anyone ever spoke about a macro-regional strategy. So this kind of strategic outlook was always there. And to our mind, this strategic outlook is, of course, very important in all the transnational areas, and it is there in all the transnational areas we have, especially in the North Sea region with the North Sea Commission. Allow me a little joke then, if cooperation in the North Sea region is sometimes a bit difficult for the moment, it might have to do with a bit of a difficult island in the North Sea, but not your part of it. And, but nevertheless, they very firmly know where they want to take their North Sea region, and they have a very pragmatic way of going about it. And that's why it's working. And if it's working, for heaven's sake, let it work. Don't try to press this in any kind of frame if it's not needed. And I would say the same is definitely true for this region here, for the Central Europe region. You have a very strategic outlook. The first thing I would look at is the cooperation program of this program and the SWOT analysis done. And that is a very strategic document of where the Central Europe region wants to go. And it really has its merits. And that's how we should read it. I mean, the strategic work has definitely been done. Not to speak of other strategic sort of visions which are being developed in this region. There's the Visegrad +2, for instance, which is a very sort of, again, territorial approach to development of this region. We've done perhaps a little bit on a smaller scale, but a lot of common work for the German-Polish interaction area, as we call it. We don't even call it border area anymore, it's the interaction area. So there is all this, there's a lot of, which ESPON also has done actually for this area. So it's all there. And this program definitely has a potential of putting it into practice, and as we've seen, of putting it into very concrete projects. And so that's really our plea. There is a strategic outlook everywhere, and let it work in the frame it has created for itself.
Thank you very much. I think basically we can come back to what I said in the beginning. It just works, so let's keep it going. However, I think a lot of people in the audience especially would agree we're not as far, and I also take it from all the interventions, from all your inputs here, we shouldn't go as far as saying like never touch a running system. So maybe we should touch on Interreg and transnational cooperation, especially when we look at program implementation and project implementation and the topics of simplification. So simplification and cutting red tape, Maury, you know better than most, but also Katharina and both Pavels know very well. These are the buzzwords that have been with us for many, many years, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people here in the audience that think, okay, it's been great buzzwords, but nothing much really was delivered in terms of simplification so far. So there seems to be a perception that there's a certain gap. Which is very often rooted in a regulatory framework designed rather for national investment-heavy programs and not for Interreg. We have heard that how special Interreg is, how strategic Interreg is, how different Interreg is also, and how much it contributes to various areas. So my question here would leave me straight to you, Pavel. Especially, again, as I said it before, you're in touch with the applicants, you're in touch with the beneficiaries, you hear about their worries and concerns very often, I think. So what do you see as the main administrative obstacles perceived by our beneficiaries and applicants for a smoother implementation, for a better system, if you want so, of transnational cooperation? What can we do?
Well, first, I would like to maybe kind of say how delighted I was that our beneficiaries, or the beneficiaries from Slovenia and Poland, nicely or politely respond to the questions how complex or is to implement a project, because they agree that it's complex, but at the same time said it's great to implement it anyway. So I think that, for instance, those two examples from Slovenia and Poland are those two enthusiastic beneficiaries who would probably implement project even though no matter how administratively difficult it would be. But we should actually try to make it as easy as possible. And unfortunately, when you talk to beneficiaries and to applicants, you see quite a long list of troubles they see. And the simplification was really, to some extent, missed opportunity for this current programming period. A lot has been done, but unfortunately still a lot has been left for the future. And the biggest, there are, let's say, several groups of those fields that the beneficiaries consider as an obstacle. Let's start with the different layers of audits and controls. This is already, for the beginning, quite heavy issue, because every beneficiary and also the beneficiaries in between you can probably agree that you have to go through several layers of controls and audits, not only on the national level, let's call it called first level control, then controls by managing certifying control, second level audit control, then also can be other national institutions or the European institutions coming to you and check it. And what is quite striking is that any subsequent audit control can actually challenge the previous one, the result of the previous one. And this brings the uncertainty to many of you and to many of the applicants who are actually discouraged then to apply for the other funding. We have already heard several times that we say, okay, are you going to apply for another call, which will be, for instance, today, will be third call? They say, no, we already have enough. So, and then when you say why, first, we don't have the administrative capacity, and the second is that they actually are really struggling a lot with those requirements from control and audit, for instance. So this is the level. So I would see that we need to have a proportional level of audits and controls. We need controls, that's for sure. Just we need to make sure that they are proportional to the number to the amounts that are involved, and also to the results of the previous audits. So this is the first point. Second point is what you hear, and this is mainly involving small institutions like NGOs, small and medium enterprises, which are very welcome for our programs, that they are struggling with finances, liquidity problems. And they would like to see pre-financing from the program level. And even though nowadays the regulatory framework allows pre-finance the beneficiaries from the program, not many Interreg programs are doing that, because it's brings them again liquidity problem to the program. It's also a problem for the fulfilling the N+3 rules, the commitment rule, because these advance payments to beneficiaries are simply not counted as a spent funds. So this is something what is an issue that beneficiaries would like to see, and it would be great that they have some finances already at the beginning of the project to pre-finance their activities. We continue further, and then also it was here said that Interreg programs are quite often compared to those centrally managed programs like Horizon, COSME, LIFE. And Interreg and those centrally managed programs finance quite similar projects and also involve similar stakeholders. It's all about exchanging experiences. Of course, there are differences, but in general terms, they are quite similar. And on the one hand, centrally managed programs are exempted from state aid rules, Interreg programs are not. And this is, again, for managing bodies, but also for beneficiaries and for us as a national authority also dealing with the state aid. It's a lot of work and a lot of bureaucratic work to deal with rather limited scope of this aid granted. So definitely the work and the bureaucratic work related to these checks is worth more money than actually the aid granted. So again, we need to think about for the future whether Interreg should not be exempted, and I think that was already on the table for this current period. And then if I come again, there's the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework is rather heavy. There's several layers of the documentation. There are regulations, delegate and implementing acts. There are guidances from the European Commission. Then there are also coming the program documentation and also national guidances. And all this actually brings also quite a lot of unclarity to beneficiaries. And so we need, again, reduction and more clarity in all those regulations and implementing and delegated acts, and also all the guidances that are produced on EU program or national level. Because otherwise, the beneficiaries are not clear what is meant, what is required from that, and then it increases the error rate. So this is an issue that we need to think how to make the regulatory framework more simple, more eatable, let's say like that, more consumable for the partners, and that will bring us less error. And one more thing, I'm sorry that I will finish in this negative sense. Sorry for that. Is The fact that I'm coming to the beginning where I started with the audit and I will finish with the audit, because unfortunately for the current period, the number of audits increased compared to the previous one, or the requirements coming from the regulatory framework. And this again is actually forcing the managing bodies and the beneficiaries to spend more money on fulfilling all those audit tasks and audit requirements. And those money could be spent otherwise more on the project content, on actually what we would like to see more happen in the territory. But we spent those money on control tasks to make sure that this €1 spent for two was correctly spent. And I see that this is something what is completely and absolutely wrong, and we need really to think for the future how to simplify. And one positive thing at the end, I would like to say that I'm very happy that the high-level group on simplification produced a very nice paper, and I recommend everyone to read it, where are very, very meaningful and really good recommendation for the future simplification.
Thank you very much. Please, feel free to support Pavel. I think we've reached a topic that is deep at the heart of people in the audience, of the project beneficiaries. Maybe talking about the high-level group input. One of the papers that really already really looks at these issues. When I look at the national position papers, they are still dealing more with the political strategies of whether there should be Interreg transnational cooperation. They are not going deep down yet, from what I read, into these issues. So I would be, before I ask Maury what is really going on there in terms of this in the Commission, what are the thoughts there, maybe we can get national feedback on, Pavel, would Poland support these ideas? Do you think they are realistic? Can you streamline audit rules for an Interreg cooperation world? Can you facilitate advance payments to beneficiaries, and could actually project beneficiaries become exempt from state aid? And then maybe also the German perspective would be very interesting here. So maybe we start with you, Pavel, as a first input.
Thank you very much for your kind word about work of high-level group, as I am part of this group, so I'm happy to hear that we did a good job. But yeah, indeed, if you are interested, it is published at the Commission's website, and there is a special reference to the Interreg. But I think I try to be provocative because I always. Before becoming deputy minister, I was for 12 years head of managing authority. And I like people saying we want everything to be simple. And when you look at current legislation, it is not complex. About Interreg in CPR, common provision regulations, you have only few provisions. So when you look, because as discussing in the high level group, we tried to give our advice to the Commission how future regulations should look like. So there is not so much to be scratched. So a lot of complexity comes from interpretations, works of managing authorities, member states. Also, some problems come from, let's say, over-prudence of some beneficiaries, and when audit comes, it becomes a rule for all. So I wouldn't blame so much regulatory framework as it is. The problem is in all us, and I think we should all be really really sincere with us, because problems usually come from audit, but to a large extent from our daily practices, from our fear that maybe audit comes and detects something. All the world is saying about innovativeness, how innovative should be, how risky risk exposure pays off. So let's take it seriously, because I am afraid that independently, whatever we adopt in the end, unless we change our own attitude, we will experience the same. So when we look also at the Interreg complexity, to a large extent, it comes also from overlapping not only this vertical approach, Commission, Member State, managing authority, beneficiary, but also with overlapping of different rules. So from our side to the Commission, there was also quite a clear recommendation to come up with off-the-shelf instruments. And I think Interreg projects are a really good area to do what has happened in other parts of the EU budget in direct management, so it could be quite easily transferred to the Interreg part. Also, when we look at state aid, so it is also reflected in the paper prepared by the group. But once again, I do not. I struggled a lot with audit during my years in the managing authority. I was very much unsatisfied with them. But also, when we look at the future, so auditors, they do what is expected of them. That's the reality. So if we expect compliance, they check compliance to the last thing. If we go for the output and result, they would do the same. So problem for Interreg is to a certain degree similar to the ESF programs I was responsible for. There is a lot of small expenditures which are to be proved, and it is really complex. But the question to the current setting is how many Interreg programs use simplified cost options, because it is not, let's say, a unique panacea for any problem, but at least it cures some issues. So I think we should change a little bit philosophy for the future, but also I would say we shouldn't look so much problems outside ourselves. Let's start with our approach, with our thinking, with our attitude, and then go and say, okay, let's say managing authority, Brussels or somebody else is responsible for all this mess. So this is something I'd like to deliver, and I always laugh because I really spent very nightmarish hours with auditors, but publicly I like to defend them because they are so blamed for many things. For the box we are all in, so we should rethink our philosophy and be able to discuss substantially, and then say, okay, we want everything to be simple. Simplicity is within us.
Thank you very much. As a communications person, this very much relates to how human beings actually work. You know, we very often also say, and it wasn't really mentioned that explicitly so far, but Interreg is also a trust-building instrument. And from what you're saying, I also hear like whoever asks a question gets an answer. So we should probably have more of a trust in ourselves that what we are doing is correct and right without asking all these questions that we've seen being asked in the past programming period. I can only support from what you said from a communications perspective again. I think there are very few lines in the regulatory framework on communication rules, but I know that there are pages over pages of frequently asked questions and answers on how to deal with communication. And Katharina, how do you see this?
Well, first of all, I hope there was an auditor in the room, because he was being given praise. So.
There are a few controllers.
Stand
we have seen them.
You're welcome. Second thing is, I'm really glad to know that, Pavel, you were behind that paper from the high-level group on simplification, because I joined what Pavel said. I think this has really, really good proposals in it. And when I read it first, I thought, wow, this has been written by somebody who actually knows an Interreg program. So thanks for that. On the other hand, I mean, if I may, but with all due respect, and of course I agree, in shared management programs, you all have to make a common effort. And maybe it's also even in that part of it that you just simply have to learn to understand each other and to understand where people are coming from. Yet, I mean, honestly, it's perhaps not so much the regulations itself, although if you read the definition of an irregularity in a regulation, I find it complicated. I remember reading papers like this on extrapolation, where I think you needed a degree in statistics to understand it. So I'm not convinced this is entirely all very simple to start with. But to put it actually in a nutshell, I think particularly with the Interreg programs, the main problem is that we still try to apply the logic designed for the mainstream programs to Interreg programs. And that's where a lot of complication is created, because it's a different thing whether we manage one program in one region with one administrative system, or managing a program, like in this case, with 8 member states concerned. And it's simply, you can't, I mean, talking of extrapolations, you simply can't assume that simply because one project with one certain partnership made a mistake, that the next one will make exactly the same mistake. That's simply not how Interreg works. So, and that's, I think, been causing a lot of trouble in the past, so which is why I'm particularly happy that, you know, with the high-level group you've been part of, that has been recognized as a problem. I think we definitely need a new set of rules, or a particular set of rules for the Interreg programs, because they simply are, by their nature, by their transnational nature, they are more complex. And if we think about that, I think for the next period, things might indeed become simpler. Thanks.
So Mauro, we're now looking at you. How can you ensure in the future regulatory framework, or what are your ideas about that when something is called simple, that it really is simple, that the high-level group inputs are reflected, and how can you avoid us coming back to the Commission with too many questions once the regulatory framework is published?
Well, I could just unplug my phone. That might be the starting point, no? When I start talking about simplification, I've got a kind of standard sentence that I have to introduce, because we've been talking about simplification every year for years. And so I tend to say that for the next programming period, yes, we are looking at simplification, and this time we're serious. And that has to be the kind of starting point from it. It does help that I've got a director from Bavaria, in fact, who has already established a key indicator for me, is to cut the length of the regulation by 25%. And every time I meet him, that percentage goes up. So it's that's one element. But what I was going to say is that there are at least 3 levels to look at, I think, when we're talking about this. And the first level is very much at the Commission and the starting point and the draft regulations. Now, contrary to popular belief, we don't always claim to get everything right. And it's absolutely clear that the size and the scope of the regulations whether or not you think most of the terminology and the content is clear, is too long and too unwieldy. There are 700 pages of cohesion policy regulations for the 14-20 period, and there are over 5,000 pages of guidance so far. And that's not usable. And that's before you consider state aid rules, public procurement legislation, national rules, programme rules as well. So we need to drastically cut the length and the complexity of the regulations. And that's not as easy as it sounds. The Common Provisions Regulation, when it left the Commission as its first proposal, was less than half the size it is now. And that's the result of negotiations in Council and Parliament. So that's the second layer of responsibility, is at the Member State and the European Parliament level, to cooperate in the negotiations, to not add multiple additional rules, and especially to not approach the need for compromise to be, well, you add the bit that I want, and then you accept the bit that, and I accept the bit that you want, which is a lot of the negotiation process in there. Level 3 is the programme level. If we aim to issue a lot less guidance, if we aim to issue a lot less interpretation, then you need to ask a lot fewer questions. And you need to, exactly as you said, Frank, I had it noted down as one of my points, take more responsibility for delivery and implementation. I want to take one example which came from an Interreg programme, cross-border, so it's not here, you're okay. But some of the text, you can argue about how much of it, but some of the text in the regulation you would say is pretty straightforward. There is a sentence in the Common Provisions Regulation which says that the list of members of the monitoring committee shall be published. Now, okay, it's in the passive tense, so it's not fantastic from a language point of view, but it's pretty clear-cut, you would say. We got an interpretation question on that. A programme asked, does that mean you publish the list of names of the people who are members of the committee, or the institutions they represent only? So if something that clear-cut generates an interpretation question, you can imagine how some of the slightly less clear provisions in the regulations generate question after question after question. And we need to take a step away from that, otherwise we will not simplify. We may succeed in reducing the scope of the regulations, but the risk would be we end up having even greater amounts of guidance and interpretation. A couple of points picking up on what Pavel raised, if I can. Advance payments is an interesting example. There's nothing in the regulation to stop advance payments. You said that yourself. There are underlying consequences, perhaps, because of the liquidity issue, etc. But there's nothing in the regulation about advance payments or to stop advance payments. So essentially, the consequence of what you're raising is we would need to increase the amount of text in the regulation to talk about it. So already, it's the dichotomy between how we address it. It a little bit reminds me, Oliver Wendell-Jones, I think, raised the issue. He said, I don't give a fig for simplicity this side of complexity, but I'd give my life for the simplicity on the other side of it. And sometimes that's a little bit how it feels when you're trying to negotiate this kind of process. Audit. One of the challenges we have on audit is that it has become a very generic term, particularly, I think, for beneficiaries. One of the discussions that we have a lot inside the Commission is, well, actually, there's not that much audit in the system. Certainly by the Commission, the number of projects the Commission audits in cohesion policy every year is a few dozen out of hundreds of thousands. But from a beneficiary, the beneficiary doesn't care who is auditing them. And the beneficiary certainly doesn't care about the difference between an audit and a first-level control. The beneficiary sits and reads Article 148 of the Common Provisions Regulation, as they tend to do. And it says that for small projects, a project will only be audited once in its lifetime. And the beneficiary goes, that's not bad. Okay, improvement. And then, in the space of a month, the beneficiary gets a visit from the managing authority, from the Joint Secretariat, from the Audit Authority, and from the Court of Auditors. And they go, wait a minute, what happened to Article 148? Because Article 148 doesn't decline the differences between that. So, what do we do? Well, a couple of slightly radical ideas, if you like. We've had occasional problems with audit in an Interreg context. And you know that there is a threshold where the error rate for a program to be on the right track is below 2%. If you look at Interreg as a group, all Interreg programs together, how many years do you think that Interreg as a whole exceeds that 2% error rate? Never. Every single year, Interreg, aggregated together, is way below a 2% error rate. Yes, okay, individual programs might be here and there, but Interreg as an objective is always below 2. So instead of looking at Interreg program by program, why not look at it as a single objective? Instead of having an audit authority program by program, why not group it at a single level? We do a single sample, which would mean possibly 30 projects a year, no more, across the whole of Europe, to generate an error rate for Interreg as a whole. Something to think about. Somebody's going to ask me what happens if the sample's above 2%, and then we get into more complications. Second area to think about, and this is something that I know our own auditors are looking at, is the approach on first-level control. The tendency, basically going back to 2006, is first-level control is 100%. Every single payment claim is checked. Is that necessary? If we have programs where expenditure is functioning correctly, if we're not having errors caught at audit authority level, could we not switch to a sample basis on first-level control? And to be honest, that would probably make the biggest difference of all, because you would suddenly have huge parts of programs and projects and payment claims not being checked at all. Again, one of the questions in reply is, what happens if there is a problem? Let's cross that bridge where we come to it. But I think we need to look at those kind of more radical approaches, and that's a little bit addressing Katarina's point, I think, about taking a differentiated approach on Interreg. We do have a separate regulation. Most of it cross-refers to the Common Provisions Regulation. Maybe there needs to be a step further down the line about making that more standalone. Again, a word of caution maybe there to finish. If it becomes too standalone, it looks like it's off by itself away from cohesion policy. You cannot lose that link because you will undermine the strength that Interreg has. So it's a delicate balance. But there's a couple of ideas to make people think.
Thank you very much. Is there a wish to immediately react on this, maybe from a national or a program perspective? Because if not, I think this is the perfect time to open to questions from the floor. I think there would be great interest. We have first-level controllers here. We have a lot of beneficiaries here. We will have future applicants here. So this is my call to you. Please stand up. Tell us who you are, who you're working for, what your question or input is, and who you would like to address it to. Any volunteers? Maybe also, yeah, there is one hand that goes up in the back.
Thank you very much. My name is Darko Verce. I'm coming from Slovenia, from A Institute. And we have been hearing a lot of more centralized perspectives. So how could transnational cooperation help to policies, to macro-regional regions and policies and strategies? But I think that exactly this type of thinking could bring to fall apart of the European Union. Because if you impose too much centralization, people will not feel like they are part of EU and they will go. They will vote against EU. And this happened in UK. And I believe if Mr. Juncker will try to do more centralized policy, some other country may follow. So my question would be, what can we do to make people happy, so to include more people from the bottom up? And I believe if the Interreg are one of the best options to include a lot of citizens directly. I'm talking about direct inclusion, so what to do to reach them. And I'm sure we can test this idea now. Maybe there is about 10 or 20% of Eurosceptics in the Central Europe area. And my question to all these 300 people would be, who of you would like to exit EU? Do we have anyone who would like their country to exit? One. Okay. Among 300, we have one person who would like to exit EU. And I'm sure if we would do questionnaire on the basis of all other countries, there will be more than just these few promilles. So I believe that based on this, because we are all included in EU, if there will be more institutions included in the trans-regional projects, this would also help to make a kind of glue for EU, that EU would stick together even stronger than before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this leads us a bit back to what we discussed in the beginning, that Interreg, what is the objective of Interreg? Is cooperation enough? Should we look into the thematic objectives? Should we allow some flexibility? What is really the reasoning behind Interreg? Which direction will it take? Does anyone feel like answering to this, the road for Interreg, for integration, for European integration, as I understand it?
I can volunteer. I'm not sure whether I have understood perfectly your question, but what we see in Poland and what we've seen in Poland, it is something I understand is also issue which you have raised, that sometimes these European priorities do not correspond with needs which are on the ground. So people perception is that what is the menu from which we choose areas of cooperation is something different. They would do as priorities for them. I would say that to a certain degree it is something which is inevitable in any public policy, because you always have to set your priorities. So always you will have some limitations from for the financing for the financing you provide. But for me also Interreg and transnational cooperation, and also some niche parts of mainstream operational programs should be set a little bit in a different way. So more as thematic approach, just to bring in some issues which are, let's say, slightly beyond investment priority we do implement, or something which is a good idea, but we have problem with implementing it. The problem is also that current spelling of investment priorities is really strange because sometimes we have big boxes, sometimes we have really problems which are punctual, which are addressing very specific issues. But I would say that we never will be able to finance from cohesion policy or national local government any need which appears. So there are certain rules here, and we simply have to accept it. But I think we used to have similar problems in Poland, as for many years overall share of EU public investment in EU public investment in overall public investment in Poland was very high. So in certain years it was up to 70 or even beyond 70% of total public investment. So which means that state and its investment budget largely comes from the EU. So there was this perception that the EU should finance everything because we have needs which are unsatisfied. Now it is decreasing, but still it is an issue. But of course for me the problem are maybe not areas which are completely different, but something which is on the border, and for prudence or fear, whatever you prefer, they are rejected. So we should go more in this thematic approach and also in place-based approach, because we see that in many cases we were forced to reject ideas which were valuable, which provided value added, but simply because of the meaning of investment priorities, they didn't fit. So we should. So my positive response is that we should try to bring those on board, but the bad thing is that we are not able to finance everything, even in the countries which very much rely on EU investment.
Yes, Katharina, please.
I completely agree. If I may just add one reflection from the last funding period, really. I mean, honestly speaking, this whole transnational exercise, and I hope that's answering your question, is very much about decentral management of things. That's the beauty of it. Coming from Germany, you know, we're a federal state. If you're here in the national government in Berlin, it doesn't mean you can press a button and people do things. Quite the contrary. And that's somehow very much, I think, an experience which we can use and apply in the Interreg programs. That's what it is. Let people on the ground find out what is good for their region. And in the last funding period, there was one article in the regulation which simply said, Interreg is there to promote integrated projects of regional and urban development. And in my wildest dreams at night, I see that sentence come back into the ETC regulation, because that's in the end what it is about, integrated projects of regional and urban development. Let people on the ground find out what is good for their region. I'm not pleading for doing, that's French, n'importe quoi, whatever you like. Of course, this has to fit, we're coming back to the strategic element of it, to an overall strategy of how we want to take that larger region. But it's got to have this element of flexibility for people who know what is their most pressing problem.
Thank you very much to both of you for bringing in the word also place-based, territorial again into this debate, because it is really key when we talk about Interreg. Maybe to move on to to another question, I've seen, I think, Mr. Carsten Debes, if I'm not mistaken, in the very back. And then Jens Kornol here in the beginning afterwards.
Hello? Yes. Yeah, my name is Carsten Debes. I come from Germany, work for the district of Zwickau, and I'm currently running an Interreg project and have been doing so for some time with previous projects before. I have actually quite a range of questions, and I know time is limited, but nevertheless, you can choose, you can pick what you answer, on which questions you answer. One question would be, there's, in my view, quite an imbalance of the spread, how the programs are distributed geographically. So you have regions, even within Germany, who just have access to one program. Other regions have access to quite a number of programs, so they can choose from. So in a way, I see there's some sort of unequal treatment. Maybe it's by nature. You can say, okay, it's your geographical disadvantage. Nevertheless, I'd like to raise that topic. Has there ever been thought about a more equal distribution of programs? The shaping of it, I mean. The second is more of a comment, because it was right now also in the answer from the panel to the question before. I'm very much convinced that cohesion and integration are more important for the transnational cooperation than competition, growth, and yes, competition and growth. The topics that were brought in the last programming period. So I'd like to stress that. And the third question maybe to you, Mr. Gilland, because you see the EU level very much. How about strategy papers for transnational cooperation? In the previous funding program, we had the Territorial Agenda 2020. Before there was the Lisbon Treaty, so documents to rely on. What would you advise programs today on which documents, strategic documents, to lean on when developing their own programs? And this is at the same time also relevant for the projects at the bottom. Thank you.
So maybe it's a pick and choose, 1 out of 3.
Or I could try and cover all 3 if you want. If I start with the middle one, I think, which is possibly the slightly easier one, but by bypassing the answer, I think it's not the right idea to try and offset the territorial dimension against competitiveness or growth. I think, you know, that's a dangerous path to tread. I think part of the approach has to be trying to sell that it's both at the same time. It's a little bit of a trite answer, but I mean, I think that's very much the direction that needs to be followed. On program areas, we haven't had a discussion on the future on that yet. I don't think member states have had a discussion on that yet either. The issue you raised is a little bit geographic reality. It's, you know, that's the basics of it. If you're in the south of Portugal, then if you're looking at broad geographic areas, then you're likely to have the Mediterranean and the Atlantic and not a lot else. That's just the reality of it. So there are usually discussions around the program areas with the member states about expansions, about edging the borders, if I can call it that, of transnational programs outwards slightly. Overlap is never the easiest thing to deal with, to be honest. It doesn't mean that there's more money at the national level, because the calculation process doesn't double count or triple count. And you do have challenges built into that. I think the last time I checked, Slovenia is in about 4 different transnational programs, and I think that brings its own challenges, even from a management process, never mind from a how you get involved in which project where. So I think there are limits to how far you can go on the geography side of things. And that's a little bit linked to the last question as well on strategic documents and strategies. I think it's very much dependent on the individual program areas about how they take that forward. Again, it's not something that I would necessarily want to try and drive from a top-down approach. I think it links back a little bit to the last question as well about identification of priorities. It's something that Central Europe as a whole, to take one example, should be looking at? What's the development priority for Central Europe? How does Central Europe go forward based on the experience so far?
Katrina.
Yeah, on the overlap issue, because I feel you're rather asking that from a German perspective to a German perspective. I mean, I can quite follow what Maury was just saying there. I mean, that's really got something to do with geography. It really depends on where you are. And there are certain parts of Germany which are like Baden-Württemberg, to take the example, which of course are linked as well to the Alpine region, as well as to the Rhine region, and if you like, even to the Danube. But that's what makes the territorial approach to these programs so important. If they are really just interchangeable, because they all fund the same thing, or to put it a bit more bluntly, because they're all being forced to fund the same things. If they're all doing innovation, then of course they're interchangeable. And that's the challenge, to make clear again, why are there areas where we need 4 different programs, because again, we want to capitalize on the different relations in space. And that's really calling for the real application of the territorial dimension in the transnational world.
Thank you very much. We are already 20 minutes delayed, and I can imagine some of you are expecting some coffee already. I've seen, nevertheless, Mr. Jens Kornol had a question. May I just quickly ask who else has an interest in asking a question? Maybe we can take 1 or 2 more. Is there any interest in additional questions? If not, maybe Jens.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jens Kornol. I've been around for a while. Started as a lead partner actually in the CADSES program in 1997, and then have been around in the committees for the CADSES Central Europe, and now more in the North and the Baltic Sea and North Sea programs. My question actually refers to something that Rosella Ruska said in the first panel, and then what State Secretary Hochhauser said, referring to our quite rigid attempt to achieve outputs and results. And Rosella, if I understood you correctly, basically what you say is that we cannot foresee the future, and that we don't know, if we really want to be innovative, what the results of a project will be in 3 years' time. So this is that there's some flexibility needed. And that was also said by the State Secretary, that the thematic concentration might be not the best way forward for this kind of cooperation in the Interreg programs. Question to Maury. How far have you progressed in the Commission when it comes to the future topics of the cooperation programs, and possibly then also in terms of the intervention logic?
That's quite an easy question. In fact, not very far. You'll have seen perhaps that President Juncker in the State of the Union announced that the next multi-annual financial framework proposals would be produced by the Commission next May, with the sectoral legislative proposals to follow before the summer. That was a kind of initial warning for us on the timing, to be honest. So basically the point is, from now on, it gets very intense on trying to deal with exactly the question you're asking.
Thank you very much. At the very end, a few insights into the timing of the future. I think in terms of timing, we're running 20 minutes late, as I said. Let's close this session. I would like to thank you very much, the panel. Please give a big round of applause to the panel. I would like to, before the coffee break, before we break for the next 30 minutes, I would like to enact the last act of cooperation up here on stage, where we do something that all of you will benefit from. And that means I would like to ask you to help me cut the 20-year anniversary cake that hopefully should be coming around the corner right now. We will just cut it, and every one of you will get a piece of that. Thank you very much, and See you after the coffee break. So maybe we can I ask you to, I will also ask our Head of Managing Authority and Head of Secretariat, Mr. Luca Ferrarese and Ms. Christiane Bresnik, to help us in this big task. Please. So, let's see what was it? Photographer. So you take the lead and maybe we do it from, if you can just go all around, we're just waiting for the photographer. Just the photographer should be coming now. Ah, there he is. Oh, sorry, ich bin voll im... As I said before, everyone will profit from this. So we have a coffee break in the back of this room, but you can also come here and pick a piece of the cake, the 20-year anniversary cake. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so for those of you who have not yet discovered what this thing is, this was our photo booth, and some of you have already been enjoying it, taking pictures. And during the networking reception or right before, if any of you would like to capture some memories from this anniversary conference, you can do so. It's very simple. You just press the touch screen and you get 3 pictures and they get printed out in the back straight away. So you can have a little souvenir of this year's conference. All right, so in the first half of the afternoon, we looked back on 20 years of Interreg Central Europe. Then we had a panel discussion looking forward into the future of transnational cooperation. And now we would like to take this opportunity to look even further into the future. And after calls for project proposals in 2015 and 2016, we're ready to launch the 3rd call for project proposals. And transnational cooperation has become increasingly interlinked, increasingly dense. And to give you a visual of what this means, we have another little film that we would like to share with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a look. All right, everyone. So now you can recognize where this board came from and how it was created. And it really does represent this already dense net of cooperation. And with this conference, of course, we're now launching a third call for project proposals. And to talk more about that, I'd like to now invite Christian Bresnik from the Managing Authority and Luca Ferrarese from the Joint Secretariat. They're going to fill you in more detail about this third call for project proposals. So let's welcome them.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in Berlin. Welcome here at this nice location at our celebration and anniversary. The day was already very dense. We have seen many films, many inputs, discussions on how our transnational cooperation enables cities and regions to cooperate together beyond the borders. We have made a link to the past, to the history. We have made a link to the future with a very interesting panel discussion. And I think we will not add anything to that because we cannot top it. I think it was very emotional, it was very interesting, it was very challenging. And it is rather our job to bring you now here and now to the present. We have the honor to launch the third call. Let's put it this way. And we too will guide you a little bit through the basics and the novelties of the third call. And let's start, I would say.
I would say so. So, also from my side, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very honored to launch, together with Christiane, the Managing Authority, the third call for proposals. And we already saw on the map that something already happened until now. We had 2 calls, 85 projects approved. We are talking about 190 million euro, out of which 160 are of European funding. We are talking about projects which are implementing smart, innovative solutions for problems which are shared across different Central European regions. We could see also in the video, the first video of today, where there was a nice representation of such flows which are touching all the regions of Central Europe. And we are talking, therefore, about 25 projects on innovation, which are moving from advanced manufacturing to entrepreneurship. We have 18 projects on low carbon, which are dealing with energy efficiency of public building or green mobility in urban areas. We have 33 projects approved under environment and culture. They are dealing with air quality, industrial archaeology, heritage, and food waste, for example. And we are dealing with 9 projects approved on the transport, which are dealing with sustainable mobility and integrated logistics. What are all these projects doing? These projects are kind of seeding new ideas, and with small funding, they are creating something bigger. They are promoting bigger public and private investment for making Central Europe better. This is what our projects are doing.
Yes, and with this third call, we would like to even make this net more dense and have even more strings around the nails with the third call. And I would like to give you now some basic features of this call. It will be a one-step procedure, meaning that you have one full application that you should fill in. It will be, so this is the same like it was in the second call, a one-step procedure. It will be web-based submission via EMS. This should there is also no change to the previous calls that we had on this submission form. The criteria for your project to be eligible from the basic criteria also did not change. You need at least 3 financing partners from 3 countries. 2 of them have to be from the Central Europe area. What is important for you is the call closure. The call closure is around 4 full months from now on. It is on the 25th of January of next year, of 2018. We were discussing this date long with the monitoring committee, and it was decided in a full agreement to give you ample opportunity and enough time to prepare your applications, to first discuss with the partnership, to discuss with, to take part in all the information measures that we will offer you, and to come clear with your applications that you have enough time to submit a good application. What will be funded? Which specific objectives can be approached that are offered by the program? I will simply go quickly through, and Luca will then go a little bit more in detail. As you know, we have 4 priorities: innovation, low carbon, environment and culture, and transport. Basically, all 4 priorities as such remain open. However, with the specific objectives, there are some changes that we would like to briefly explain to you. We will not be very long on these topics in these explanations, because you will find much more information in the application material that you will find online. So, under the priority 1, innovation, both specific objectives are available: strengthening linkages for regional innovation, entrepreneurial competencies and skills for social innovation and economic innovation. In principle, they will remain open, but more details to them will come then later. In priority 2, low carbon, we have 2 specific objectives that can be addressed, which is the specific objective 2.1, energy efficiency in public infrastructure. Also here, more information will follow. The second one, 2.2, low carbon energy planning for climate change mitigation, remains fully open, so in all aspects that are described in the operational program. However, the third one, 2.3, mobility planning in functional urban areas, is closed. So for this specific objective, you cannot apply anymore. Priority 3, environment and culture, remains fully open as it is described in the operational program for the specific objectives 3.1, protection and sustainable use of natural heritage and resources, and for the third one, 3.3, environmental management of functional urban areas. The specific objective 3.2, however, will be a little bit focused, and this will be explained also later. Priority 4, transport, is in both specific objectives fully open, as described with the actions in the cooperation program.
And now maybe we can a little bit put the attention to the big novelty of this call compared to the past. Because as already mentioned by Christiane, there are 4 specific objectives where not everything will be possible any longer, or let's say not everything which is listed in the cooperation program will be possible. There is a thematic focus which has been decided by the monitoring committee on the basis of a thorough analysis on what is there with our projects, what is needed from the regions, and what can be realistically achieved. So there was this analysis done, and basically the monitoring committee decided to take the way of having, giving a thematic spin to these specific objectives for various reasons. The first one, with the thematic focus, the program wants to address those challenges and satisfy those needs which are important for the Central European regions, but they are not yet fully addressed or covered by the already 85 approved projects. So the third call is a good chance for closing some gaps in this respect. The second point that led the monitoring committee to decide for a thematic focus was the fact that compared to when the program was defined back in 2013 and 2014, things happened. There were big social and economic changes in Central Europe. And therefore, with this call, with the thematic focus, we want to address these challenges, these emergencies which are faced by regions, talking about migration, for example, or for some extent, economic declines. The third point, which was taken into consideration when deciding for the thematic focus, was the wish of the monitoring committee to improve the coordination and the synergies with other European policies and European instruments. This is also a little bit the pathway for the future. We need to coordinate and find synergies with other instruments and other funding opportunities coming from the European Union. And this is what is the third point that we addressed when deciding for the thematic focus. And now maybe we can go a little bit deeper. Of course, now we will still give a very brief overview of what is the thematic focus about. You will find a lot more in the application documents and also in the training and information events I will mention in a minute. So talking about the specific objective 1.1, that, as we said, it addresses the improving linkages between actors of the regional innovation systems. Here we have a focus specifically on the bottom-up implementation of smart specialization strategies. Why? Because it has been seen, I mean, from one side, the smart specialization strategies are the strategic framework which all the regions have to comply within cohesion policy. There was an analysis done by the European Commission showing that there are different regions in Central Europe which have similar challenges and they have similar priorities in their smart specialization strategies. Therefore, the idea here is to help the implementation from the ground of these smart specialization strategies through, for example, linking public and private, linking public with private, with research sector, and with the civil society, the so-called triple and quadruple helix approach, or promoting innovative models for implementing the smart specialization strategies, for example, open innovation and co-creation, or and also promoting actions which are somehow improving the capacity of regions to bring innovation closer to the market. So this is a little bit the focus of the first specific objective. What maybe is to be mentioned is that under the specific objective, it is not possible to fund pure research projects. This is clear. This is not the core of Interreg. It is not possible to fund any longer pure technology transfer projects, which are not embedded into the smart specialization strategies of the regions involved in the project.
Okay, if we now move to the specific objective 1.2, it has the title Improve Skills and Entrepreneurial Competencies for Advancing Economic and Social Innovation. However, we have not seen enough projects on social innovation. So this focus should strengthen exactly projects that are more dealing with social innovation. Central Europe is strongly affected by brain drain, by demographic change, by migration. We have a lot of vulnerable groups in our program area, and therefore we would expect more projects dealing with that. So the focus will be on social innovation and integration of disadvantaged groups and regions. And what we can think of is having social innovation policies and practices with strategic tools, with services related to that. We also would like to see projects that deal with the integration of migrants and other disadvantaged groups in society and in the labor market. We also would like to foster entrepreneurship, maybe even of migrants, so that they get skills, or the integration of migrants and other disadvantaged groups. And as a last one, social entrepreneurship, if it is making a positive impact on social innovation. So what we do not want to see, because we have a lot of very good projects on this already, is projects on pure training or building business competencies and entrepreneurship if they do not have a specific focus on social innovation. So it is not that the project we have, they're brilliant, but we are still missing an important area that we have programmed, where we also see the needs in Central Europe and where we'd like to a little bit steer the applications in this direction.
Okay, so now moving to the priority axis 2, low carbon. As we said in the beginning, in the overview, there is a thematic focus on the specific objective 2.1, which is dealing with energy saving and using of renewable energies in public infrastructures. And what we could see from what we have until now is that projects are very well covering the topic of public buildings, like administrative buildings. They are well covering the type of infrastructures like schools. We have very good projects in schools. And we have also very interesting projects and very promising projects on street lights. So let's say these topics are already well covered. So what we said is that what we want to focus, the specific objective 2.1 for the third call, will be to have projects, again, dealing with energy efficiency and renewable energy usage in public infrastructures, projects dealing with financing of energy efficient renovation, projects dealing with integration of renewable energy sources, but with the focus on certain types of infrastructures. So we are talking about transport infrastructure, meaning rails, roads, water transport, including terminals, water infrastructure, meaning water supply and distribution, waste and wastewater infrastructure for the treatment of the waste, and then something which is emerging, which is very kind of relevant for the regions, is ICT infrastructure. So all the infrastructure linked with the provision of ICT services. As I said, obviously, what we will not support any longer under these specific objectives are projects on hospitals, public administration and buildings, schools, and street lights.
Okay, now I come to the last thematic focus that we mentioned before. It is in priority 3, where we said the specific objective 3.1 and 3.3 remain open as they are described in the operational program. However, we would like to see a little bit to steer the applications in specific objective 3.2, which is called to improve the capacities for sustainable use of cultural heritage and resources. And here we did not have many applications and approved projects with a focus on creative industries. So this is basically the focus we would like to have applications in these specific objectives. So we see what we expect are cross-sectoral cooperation of cultural heritage actors with those of creative industries. We would like to support small businesses in creative industries with their incubators and hubs. And also, if you are applying and bringing in project ideas, what to do with the reuse of abandoned sites for cultural activities, also they have necessarily be linked with creative industries factors. We do have a lot of very good projects that link historical sites. For instance, this is an example with the cultural roots. So such projects will not be funded anymore. That's why we would like to be as clear as possible on that. Or if you have a protection of a cultural site without linking it to creative industries. Also here we have very good and enough projects on this area, so we will also not fund this anymore. But as we said, and we will come in detail into that, you will get a lot of guidance, a lot of discussion possibilities on what is possible in the third call in the next weeks. Let's talk about budget. The program is planning to allocate 60 million ERDF funding into this third call, with 20 million indicatively in innovation, 10 million on low carbon, so on priority 2, 20 million in natural and cultural resources, and 10 million in priority 4, transport. This budget is, of course, indicatively allocated, and so it could be more, it could be less in total for the call, because it also a little bit depends on the applications that we will receive, and it could be also allocated then a little bit differently within the priorities, because also here we will have a close eye on the quality of the applications and on the relevance of the applications.
Yeah, and then let's move a little bit to what will be published today at the launch of the call, so what we call application package. But before doing this, I would like maybe to ask a question to you. How many people here had already experience in previous calls of the Interreg Central Europe program? Okay.
50%.
50%. So in turn, it means that 50% had no really experience on the
welcome
with the previous call. So that's very good. That's very good news, I must say. And so it's worth also, especially for those which are not yet familiar and will become soon familiar with our procedures for application, to mention what is the application package about. It's made of 3 main things. The first one is the announcement. This is the, let's say, legal term of the call, of the third call, where there is all the compulsory information to be included according to regulations. There, I recommend you to read it, because it gives a very comprehensive but still short view of what is the call about, including thematic focusing and everything, selection criteria and everything. Of course, this is general, but still, to understand what is the call about is a good reading. The main document of the application package is, of course, the application manual. The application manual is a detailed document which does not give only instructions, but it gives also guidance. It is composed of 5 parts, A, B, C, D, E, and it contains also, I think, valuable hints on how to design your project. This has been wrote by people which were dealing with projects since a long time, and this contains really valuable guidance, especially, I mean, I like mostly the so-called part C of the manual, where I think it is a good, let's say, EU project designing manual, which could be also used for other programs, I mean. So please have a look to that. And then I would like to point your attention to the Annex 1. I know by experience that sometimes applicants look at the core document and they forget the annexes. Please check Annex 1. Annex 1 is about the description of the specific objectives in detail for the third call. So comprehensive information, including background information, what are the problems to be addressed, what are the results expected, what are the actions to be expected within the third call are listed there. Please check it carefully, because there is a lot of valuable information which will enable you to already judge if you are in one of those specific objectives which are with a thematic focus. It will help you judging whether your project is fine with this call. But also for the other specific objectives, especially if you are a newcomer, have a look, because you might have the need to rethink your proposal if this is not fully fitting to what is written there. And then, of course, we have the application form. The application form is given on the website as a Word file. We did on purpose to have it on Word file, because then you can also use, in order to exchange between partners, pieces of descriptions or things like that. But keep in mind that the application has to be written in EMS, electronic monitoring system, meaning that this is only for information purposes.
As usual, as soon as you have submitted your full application, and this should be before the 25th January, 6 p.m., then the proposals are assessed against some formal checks. So we will make an administrative check. And if we find everything is described also in the application form, but if we have some informations where you have to send us something that can be healed, then we will address you as soon as you have submitted. And those proposals that pass this formal check run into a quality assessment. Here, the proposals are first assessed against the relevance. So for the relevance, objectives, results, transnationality, policy, and territorial relevance. If they pass this relevance check, then they get into a full assessment, and it is performed only on those applications that have passed the relevance filter. If not relevant, you are not assessed, and the project is rejected, the application is rejected. I would like to give you maybe on this kind of a preview on the timeline. Of course, we do not know how many applications we will receive, and as you might have made your quick calculation on the envelope, it looks like this is the last bigger call that we have, so we might even have many applications coming in. But we do think that you should plan your start of implementation with beginning of 2019. So I think that with the assessment and maybe with starting with contracting, we might be able to do this in the first quarter of 2019. Also, this is an information for your planning.
And now let's move to information and support. As Christiane mentioned, we have 4 months ahead as from now in order to close the call. Of course, there is Christmas in between, but still, we are planning to kind of offer to applicants our best resources in order to support and inform you as much as we can. And we would like then, I would like to present you a little bit what we planned as information support measures in 3 main categories. The first one is web-based, and I would really like to underline the website, the program website, under the section Apply, where there you find a lot of information. And there will be there also soon published a section on frequently asked questions for the applications, which is, I find, very interesting and very useful. There is then a tool which is meant to help proposals in finding good partners. So we have this Central Europe online community, and together with the social media, namely LinkedIn, we want to help project ideas, if they want so, to be shown off, to be published in order maybe to get some interesting partners. We will have also other tools web-based. We will do some webinars, which will be, there will be quite a number of webinars which will be published on our website as soon, very soon, in the next weeks, I would say, with dealing with different topics, from EMS to how to fill the application form until state aid. So there will be a lot of information, meaning that there will be our people there presenting and receiving online directly questions from the people listening the webinar. And then, of course, we have our tutorials in the Central Europe YouTube channel, where you will find a lot of information, together also with the nice videos we have seen today. With regard to information and training events, we have national information days in all the countries which are participating, in all the 9 countries which are participating in Central Europe. And for those which already know our program a little bit from previous call, I want to say that this will be a little bit different from the past. Because in these national information days, in addition to giving general information to anybody interested in the program, we will be also there with the Joint Secretariat in giving some more training, some more detailed information on the application process. So there will be a part run mostly by the national contact points, and the second part, which might also switch to English if we don't have enough, let's say, language knowledge in the office for covering all the countries, which will deal with specific topics which might be of interest for the application process. And then another novelty is that we will have a transnational thematic workshop, which basically this will be a set of consecutive workshops on the 4 topics which are or the 5 topics we are dealing with our program. So innovation, low carbon, environment, culture, and transport. This I will show you in a short while when and where these things will happen. So this is something rather new compared to what we did in the past. And also, again, speaking for those which already know us from the past, I would like to underline that in this third call, we will not have any longer those which were called individual consultations, because we got feedbacks from applicants that they were not happy because they wanted to know, is my proposal good, but we are not checking the proposals before the assessment. So it was a little bit complicated, this. And this was, on the other hand, so not so much appreciated. So we said, okay, let's focus more on thematic guidance, on practical guidance with web-based and also with events. Of course, we have still the one-to-one guidance. We have our network of national contact points, which are there to help you if you have some general questions of linked more with information about the program, what the program is funding. And of course, we have a help desk. This help desk at the Joint Secretariat will deal with general questions on how to apply and processes and procedures, but also we will deal with the thematic questions if needed. We are there. Just feel free to contact us. We will also, of course, have a specific help desk for electronic monitoring system. And by experience, we know that it is needed. Again, what we don't do in the one-to-one guidance is pre-check of proposals. We are not able to tell you in advance whether your proposal is fundable or not, because this is not possible since we are then assessing your proposal. Everything you need to find about all these information support measures is in the Interreg Central Europe website in the section Apply.
Now we are moving a little bit into detail to these 2 new information, or one is a little bit revamped, the other one is completely new. Maybe you can also click the next one. So the trainings and info days. So we have in every of the 9 member states an info day, a national info day, which again, to repeat what already Luca said, will be now extended. So you have a first general part held by the national contact points, and then a second part, which is then done and implemented by the Joint Secretariat, where also you can start to discuss your ideas on thematic issues in a group where it is much better to go into detail to see if you have the right focus, if you fit on what is expected by the program. As you can see, we start with some of them rather quickly, so already next week in Slovakia, then having most of them in October in the other member states, in Italy in November. But I would like to draw your attention to the Transnational Thematic Workshop in Prague, which is open to all applicants, as are also the national info days. They are open to all applicants and not only to lead applicants. And in Prague, we will really go in 4 consecutive thematic sessions, so not parallel, so you can listen to all of them in a consecutive way if you are not sure if you fit in the one or in the other. And in addition, this will be complemented by other technical information. So these are important dates for you, where you get really bilateral and face-to-face information on your project idea.
And now I think it's time to launch the call, Christiane.
Yes, it's time to launch the call. This we will do. And to tell you, it's also today EC, it's Cooperation Day. So we also are very happy that we could combine this event with the EC Cooperation Day and that we can launch the call this day. Okay,
Yes.
then let's do it.
Shall we?
Yes, we...
So the call is open, and now you can download.
So the call is now open, and our technical experts have already put all the information on the web, so it should be accessible right now. From this minute, you can find everything on this button. And I think this was from us. I mean, anyway, you have really a very patient. This day you got a lot of information, and I hope that you will apply, that you got a lot of input today, but I think that we are now available for questions.
Maybe just from my side, good work. I know this will be 4 very dense months for all of you, and we will do our best to support and accompany you as much as we can. Now, of course, if you have questions, we are here.
Everything clear?
I don't think so.
Or you are simply too tired?
Or we were too comprehensive.
All right, well, if there are no immediate questions, then let's have another warm round of applause for Christiana Bresnik and Luca Ferrarese for all the information. So perhaps if somebody thinks of something, they can find you during the networking reception later this evening, so feel free to approach either one of them if a question does come to you. But thank you very much.
And not only today, we are of course here tomorrow, the whole day, so in case you have any questions, do feel free to ask us. Thanks, and have a nice evening.
We have to.
Okay, so I just realized you're not off the hook yet. We're going to need you in just a moment. So ladies and gentlemen, we know it's getting kind of late, but before we let you go, now comes the fun part. So some of you were able to take part in the treasure hunt that we had this morning, but for those of you who could not be there, just a few notes about it. There were teams put together who didn't know each other. They had a mission of discovering achievements related to Interreg-funded projects in different spots all around Berlin. So yes, somebody was working very hard earlier this morning. So they had to learn about the various tools and activities developed by Interreg and by partners of Interreg. They had to cooperate very closely together. They had to do all sorts of wacky things, including filming an interview. They were sent to the main train station of Berlin. Anyway, they worked very hard, and now we would like to reward their efforts this morning. And it was already mentioned that today is not only the 20th anniversary of Interreg Central Europe, it's also September 21st, so European Day of Cooperation. So the prizes that the 3 winning teams are going to receive are somehow related to European cooperation. And we're going to find out what that is in just a moment. So is everyone ready to hear who are the winning teams? Yeah? Okay, do I have a drum roll? I need people to make a drum roll sound with your legs. Drum roll, please. Okay. In 3rd place was the team with the wonderful name. Oh, my God. Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so in 3rd place was Dream Team with 1,050 points. So Dream Team, come on over here.
I only need 3.
So congratulations. So I think your prizes is over here. Okay, here's the Dream Team. Hello, hello. So they're getting their prizes. So what are their prizes? What are their prizes?
It's things from the European Cooperation Days.
Okay, thanks from European Cooperation Day. Okay, so. All right, if you want a picture, a photo of the winning team in third place, you can push those buttons and get a photo to show your friends and family members. All right, say cheese, everyone. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, are we ready for second place? The second place team is... I need a drum roll again. Everybody with your legs. Drum roll. Yes. And in second place is the team Go Berlin 2.0. Where are they? Yoo-hoo! All right. So here are the members of the Go Berlin with 2 N's 2.0. In second place, all right, congratulations to you. Well done, well done. Thank you. Oh, here you go, okay. They also get their prize. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh, another member is missing. Oh, the photographer, okay. All right, so you can also have a winning picture if you like as well. High five, all right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and now the moment everybody's been waiting for. The grand prize winners in first place. Another last drum roll. In first place with 1,380 points is the team Green Berlin. Yoo-hoo! Here they come, our first place winners. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. All right, they get their prizes as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've just learned we have another prize to give out right now. So maybe some of you also were aware that for the last 20 weeks before today's conference, okay. Okay, that was the goodbye music for our 3 teams. All right, so there's another prize to give out, and that is for the person who in the last 20 weeks before today's conference, we posted a question on the Interreg Central Europe Facebook page. And the person who answered the largest number of questions correctly is also going to receive recognition, fame, and a prize. So now, once again, we have another winner of our Facebook quiz contest, and that winner is, now I need another drum roll. I did need one more. Drum roll, please. Is Eva Olenikova. Where is she? There she is. All right. Congratulations. So, and before we let these 2 off the stage as well, congratulations. Oh, a photo. Don't forget the photo. But before we let these two individuals off the stage, there's somebody who needed to make just a few quick remarks. It's okay, they're busy. He can go get his microphone in the meantime.
Sorry, this is not planned.
This is not planned, that's all right.
This is not in the protocol, and I'm not clear whether it's up to me to say this, but before you close, I had the feeling we applicants, and I represent applicants since 20 years almost, and I help them as a consultant, and I work with so many partners, and I think there should be one who is 20 years in this program to say thank you to the program. We are very good in complaining. We are very good in telling what is wrong and that you do everything wrong. But I think now is the time to say you do a lot of things very good and your team. And I would like, on behalf of the partners who are in the program since 20 years, to say thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I actually think that in this kind of spirit, I would also like to thank all of you for coming to the conference, for participating, for asking some questions, for listening with interest, with attention. So thank you to everyone who participated in today's conference. Some of you traveled very far away. Some of you traveled from Kreuzberg and Berlin, perhaps. But many thanks indeed to everybody for participating in such an intense and interesting conference. But it's only the first day. So tomorrow's another day. We look forward to more discussions and also to the networking session this evening. So I wish all of you an enjoyable evening tonight and a productive and interesting second conference day tomorrow. For me, also, many thanks indeed. Have a nice evening, everybody.